wizards of Hogwarts who registered in Middle-earth. Hey! Look who's back for more adventures. We love having you here to continue this story that keeps us all awake. Important note, all of this is pure fiction. So don't try any techniques you hear here in real life, your neighbor might call the cops. This amazing novel and all its rights belong to the original author. We're just the ones giving it voice and drama. Are you enjoying the show? Prove it by subscribing to our YouTube channel and leaving that like that motivates us so much. And if you want VIP access to exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting with things you won't find anywhere else. Chapter 76, Hidden Arrow Attack. Seeing the densely packed orc army swarming the mountains, everyone felt a sense of dread. The dwarf buffer looked at Dui with hope. Dui, quickly get out your crying plant and kill them. The others also looked at him expectantly. After all, the scene in the goblin cave was still fresh in their minds. Dui glanced at the surroundings, then noted the distance to the wargs. He shook his head and said, "Don't get your hopes up with the mandrake. The cave environment is unique, so it can only have such an effect. But this is the wilderness, and at a distance, the mandrake's cry won't have much of a devastating effect." Despite this, he still took out the mandrake. After casting a soundproofing spell on everyone, he pulled the mandrake out and threw it toward the charging orcs and wargs. As Dui had expected, the wargs and orcs closest to him, caught off guard by the mandrake's cry, instantly collapsed to the ground, their lives uncertain. Only the distant wargs and orcs escaped. Terrified by the scene, they immediately halted their attack. The orc leader, hearing the faint cries, felt a sharp pain in his head and looked fearfully at Dui and the humanoid plant that had uttered the cries. "Retreat out of earshot, Dark Whisper," the orc leader said. "He's the black-robed wizard. There's something strange in his hand. Don't listen, but the leader has told us to get the dwarf's head, Dark Whisper," the orc deputy warned. "Then attack from a distance. Shoot them, Dark Whisper, the leader only wants the head." On Dui's side, the dwarves saw the orcs and wargs hesitate to approach and cheered, making crude gestures to provoke the distant orcs. But the next second, a dense barrage of arrows descended upon Dui and his companions. Dui raised his wand, forming a barrier to block the countless arrows. But just as everyone cheered Dui once again, he felt a jolt of warning in his heart, as if a fatal threat was brewing. The next moment, he saw the towering orc leader, grinning grimly, shoot an arrow at him from a distant hilltop. Before Dui could react, the arrow, ignoring the magical barrier, pierced through it, striking Dui in the chest. "Dui!" Everyone gasped in shock. Unable to believe Dui had been struck by an arrow, they gathered around him. "Dui, are you alright?" Bilbo asked anxiously. Gandalf, the quickest to react, rushed to Dewey's aid, his expression concerned. But when he saw the black arrow lodged in his chest, his face suddenly changed. "Morgur's arrow? Morgur's arrow? What is that?" Bilbo asked. "It's an arrow forged in mortar, inscribed with a dark spell and tipped with a deadly poison. It kills anyone struck by it with agonizing death." "Will Dewey be alright?" The dwarves looked worriedly at the pale Dewey. "Ahem." Dewey's cough drew everyone's attention. "How are you feeling, Dewey?" Bilbo asked nervously. Dewey shook his head, pulled the arrow from his chest, and tore open his robes. Beneath his robes, Dewey wore a coat of silver mail. "Mithril mail," Thorin exclaimed in surprise. "I didn't expect you to possess such a treasure. No wonder you could block Morgul's arrows." "Great. Dewey, you're alright," Bilbo exclaimed happily. Gandalf and the dwarves breathed a sigh of relief. Dewey stared at the arrow in his hand with lingering fear. If he hadn't worn the mail since he found it in the hollow, he would have been in grave danger today. Thinking of this, Dewey looked at the orc leader on the distant hilltop with a cold gaze. His journey so far had been mostly smooth sailing, but today, this very creature had nearly tripped him up. "Up, Dewey, that mandrake outside seems to have stopped barking," the dwarf Keely suddenly reminded him. Everyone looked toward the mandrake plant outside the soundproofing spell. They found it drooping and limp, as if weary of crying. It groaned and slumped, uttering no sound. The orcs watching from afar also noticed this and began to stir. "Mandrake, come." Dui summoned the mandrake and returned it to the oil in the pot, allowing it to rest. "Gandalf, please lead Thorin and the others in the breakout," Dui instructed Gandalf. "What about you, me?" Dui glanced at the orc leader on the distant hill, his eyes filled with murderous intent. "Of course, I'll go and eliminate that leader." Although his mithril mail had blocked the Morgul's arrow, a dull ache lingered in his chest. He felt uneasy if he didn't avenge that arrow. Mist shrouds. Dui unleashed a mist, enveloping the area for miles, giving Gandalf and his men a chance to escape unnoticed while also allowing himself the opportunity to attack. The appearance of the fog unnerved the orcs and wargs, who could only rely on their howls to determine each other's location. Dui weaved through the fog, guided by the Stone of Truth, and approached the orc leader with impunity. Encountering a Worgen orc halfway, Dui struck with ruthless force, smashed to pieces. With a scream from the warg, the orc and orc were instantly torn into countless pieces by the overwhelming force. The other orcs and wargs in the fog grew restless, and the orc leader's face darkened. Gather all together, to prevent a surprise attack from the wizard. Dark language. The warg beneath him heard the command and let out a mighty roar. The other wargs, hearing it, quickly converged on the leader. Dui, watching the scene from his orb, sneered, "Think numbers mean an advantage? This gives me the opportunity to finish them off once and for all." Hearing the screams emanating from the fog, the orc leader's eyes darkened with fear. He knew the wizard was targeting him. But seeing the nearly 1,000 men and wargs gathered around him, he felt a slight sense of relief. Even if the wizard's magic was powerful, it couldn't possibly kill so many people at once, let alone himself. Just then, as if sensing something, the warg beneath him bared its fangs towards the nearby mist. "Shoot! Shoot there!" Dark whisper. The orcs reacted quickly, unleashing countless arrows in the direction the wargs were wary of. The orc leader drew another Morgul arrow and blasted it into the mist. A barrage of arrows vanished into the mist, leaving the orcs anxiously awaiting the outcome. 10,000 arrows, a voice echoed from the mist. A second later, all the arrows he had just fired were reflected. Countless screams and howls echoed, and countless orcs and wargs were killed and wounded. The orc leader quickly grabbed an orc's men and shielded himself, avoiding being shot. Before he could even breathe a sigh of relief, a blinding red light flashed across his irises, and the orc leader's face lit up with terror. Thunderbolt. The magic was dazzling, yet it carried a deadly signal. With a deafening explosion, countless orcs and wargs were swept away. Those closer were shattered to pieces, while those further away were sent careening back, killing and wounding countless others instantly. Even the dense fog was ripped apart by the massive blast, rapidly dispersing. Chapter 77 Azog. The explosion site was a shattered mess, rubble strewn across the ground. Black blood flowed, and fragments of wargs and orcs were scattered everywhere. Dui strolled forward, wand in hand, easily slicing down the lingering orcs and wargs. He reached the orc leader, only missing an arm and a leg, and raised an eyebrow in surprise. "You're quite lucky, still alive, wizard. You don't know who you're fighting," the orc leader threatened, his eyes etched with fear, his voice hoarse. "Our master possesses immense power. He is the Lord of Darkness. The whole world will prostrate at his feet, and you are powerless to stop him, your master." "Are you referring to Soren, the one hiding in Dol Guldur?" Dui asked with a sneer. But before he could say anything more, the Morgul arrow that had narrowly missed Dui's head pierced his head, killing him instantly. After defeating the orc leader, Dui finally breathed a sigh of relief, not caring about the remaining orcs and wargs fleeing. "Let me see where Gandalf and the others are," Dui muttered, pulling out the Stone of Truth. What's going on?" Dui's eyes widened as he leaned closer to the crystal. "Why is there another orc group? They've chased us to the cliffs." Looking at Gandalf and his companions, cornered and trapped by the orcs, and then at the leader, riding a white wolf, Dui's gaze fell on him. From the iron claw on his severed hand to the hateful look he gave Thorin, his identity was clear. Could this be Azog the Blasphemer? The leader of the goblins? As if sensing something, the Gandalf in the mirror shouted in his direction, "Dui, we need your help." Dui couldn't hear Gandalf's voice, but he knew he was asking for help. He shook his head helplessly. Gandalf was truly unfortunate. Despite being a Maya, possessing the power of a demigod, he was restricted from using overly powerful magic. Dewey had previously secretly questioned Gandalf, and Gandalf had cryptically explained that they, the wizards, were not allowed to use magic excessively. Instead, they were supposed to guide, not supplant, the free people of Middle-earth. To avoid undermining their free will, Dewey simply chastised the Valar, who set the rules. They were no different from the leaders of the previous life, demanding their subordinates complete their tasks while imposing a multitude of restrictions. It was no wonder Gandalf preferred to strike with his staff rather than cast spells, sparing himself the tedious considerations of magic. Shaking his chaotic thoughts, Dewey hurried in the direction of Gandalf and his companions. They were now forced to hide in the trees. If he didn't leave now, they would likely fly away on their giant eagles. Meanwhile, atop the misty mountains, Thorin and Azog, their enemies, met with a veiled gaze. Thorin was shocked that Azog was still alive. Azog, still grudged for having his arm severed, considered Thorin a mortal threat and vowed to kill him. After all, Thorin Oakenshield earned his name from the time he used an oak shield to sever Azog's arm. Azog had previously placed a bounty on Thorin's head. Now, he even led his warg riders in pursuit, determined to slay Thorin in the misty mountains. "What do I smell?" "It's the smell of fear," Azog taunted, gazing at Thorin, who was hiding in a tree. "That's the smell of your father, Thorin son of Thrain. Leave him to me, and kill the rest." At Azog's command, all the wargs scrambled up the trees, tearing and biting. The orcs seemed to relish the dying struggles of their foes, so they didn't shoot them with their bows. Instead, they let the wargs press forward, until the dwarves were overcome with despair and terror. The dwarves looked at the giant wolf below, its fangs bared, and shouted as they used their weapons to force it back. "Think of what to do. I don't want to end up in one of these giant wolves and be pulled out. Where's Dwar? When will he come? If only Dwar were here, we could just throw his crying grass over there and save ourselves all this trouble." "Forget it. Dwar has thousands of orcs and wargs to deal with. How can he get rid of them so easily?" Bilbo clung to the tree trunk tightly to avoid being shaken off by the giant wolf, and asked Gandalf hopefully, "Gandalf, do you know when Dwar will come?" Gandalf shook his head. "I can't guarantee that. After all, he's facing thousands of orcs and wargs. It's not easy to deal with them, and we can't rely on Dwar for everything. That wouldn't be good for either you or Dwar." As he spoke, he saw Amwath on the tree, and his eyes lit up. "But if we have time, perhaps we could call for help from some friends." He caught Amwath, held it in his palm, whispered softly, and then let it fly away. After a delightful game of cat and mouse, the orcs finally lost their patience and ordered the wargs to overturn the pine trees. The wargs' immense force and bites caused the trees to fall one by one, forcing the occupants to leap from one tree to another to delay the process. By the time they had all landed on the last pine, it was teetering on the brink of collapse. Facing the approaching wargs below, the group was in dire straits. Gandalf plucked a pine cone, lit it with his staff, and threw it to the ground. The flames quickly spread to the fallen trees, igniting a raging blaze. Such rapidity was evidently due to Gandalf's magic. The flames temporarily forced the wargs to retreat, saving the last pine they had found. But before anyone could breathe a sigh of relief, the pine tree, unable to bear the weight, torpedoed and toppled over the cliff face in a moment of panic. Everyone was dangling from the cliff face, threatened to fall at any moment. To buy his companions more time, Thorin descended from the tree and chose to duel Azog once more. But this time, Thorin failed to maintain his previous victory. Azog easily defeated him and severely wounded him. Just as Thorin was about to be killed by Azog, Bilbo wielded his stinging sword, stopping Azog's final blow. Furious and murderous, his chance to kill his greatest enemy was interrupted. Azog struck Bilbo's sword with a single blow. "Kill him," Azog commanded his giant wolf, and then continued his attack on Thorin. "Tear him to pieces." A dazzling spell struck the warg as it bit Bilbo, instantly ripping it into countless pieces. Bilbo was startled, then exclaimed in delight, "Dweir!" Seeing his mount torn to pieces, Azog was startled by the suddenness of the situation. A second later, his keen sense of danger spurred him to react, grabbing one of his men and throwing himself in front of him. Dewey's magic followed, striking the orc in front of him. Its body instantly shattered, and black blood splattered all over Azog. Chapter 78 Death of Azog. Black Wizard, Dark Tongue. Azog looked at the suddenly appearing Dewey with fear. Seeing him arrive safely without seeing the other orcs, his heart sank. "Are you looking for this?" Dewey threw the head of the orc leader in front of Azog. "I've already sent that orc to hell. You won't be able to wait for them, or I can send you to meet them." Torn to pieces, the villain dies because of his talk. Although Dewey didn't consider himself a villain, he still believed in the principle of swift victory and attacked without hesitation. If Azog, the orc leader, was killed here, the orcs would be leaderless for a while, perhaps preventing the subsequent pursuit and the battle of the five armies at Lonely Mountain. Dewey's magic was fast, and Azog's reaction time was also not bad. Orcs valued strength, and Azog's leadership position was achieved by killing countless competitors. With immense strength and quick reflexes, Azog dodged dual spells. Those who couldn't avoid them simply pulled up nearby minions to serve as human shields. Seeing himself at a disadvantage, Azog raised his good arm and unleashed a hidden bolt from his wrist. It was a Morgul arrow inscribed with dark spells. Duel, wary, immediately used the levitation spell to control a pine log to block his path. But this gave Azog an opportunity. He plucked an orc from the warg, lifted himself up, and fled. Other orcs and wargs also fled in panic. Duel, don't let Azog escape, the dwarves shouted anxiously. Don't worry, he can't get away. Duel watched the fleeing Azog calmly, as if prepared for the trap. The next moment, Azog and the warg, before they had even gotten far, plunged headfirst into the mud, the swamp that had suddenly appeared before the trap. The orcs and wargs behind followed suit, struggling in the swamp's mud. Azog didn't give up, climbing out of the swamp by stepping on their wargs. Then, mercilessly using his orcs' wargs as stepping stones, he leaped high across the swamp. Wizard, I will remember you. You will be my lifelong enemy. Azog stared intently at Dewey, his greatest concern now shifting from Thorn to the wizard. He responded with a dazzling spell. Thunderbolt. The immense force of the explosion ripped the mountain apart, triggering a landslide. Ah, the mountain is falling, the dwarves screamed in terror, as the cliffs they were perched on were already cracking and threatening to collapse. Don't panic, our eagle friends are here, Gandalf announced the good news. As soon as he finished speaking, the sky rang with the resounding cries of eagles. A dozen enormous eagles flew towards the crowd, snatching them up and taking flight amidst the crowd's exclamations. Dewey was also targeted by a giant eagle. Without giving him time to react, it rushed over, grabbed him, and flung him onto the back of another eagle. The thrill of the scene made Dewey gasp in surprise. As the giant eagles carried everyone skyward, the mountain and cliffs below could no longer support them and quickly collapsed, taking the orcs and wargs with them, crushed and buried by the boulders. Huh? They're still alive? Are they that lucky? Dewey, worried, had taken out the palantir to check on Azog, only to find him still alive. It turned out that during the landslide, Azog had used the iron hook attached to his severed arm to cling to the cliff face, avoiding being crushed or killed. Could this be the villain's luck? How could they survive until the finale? Dewey didn't believe it. He patted the giant eagle beneath him. Brother Eagle, can we discuss something? Please take me down first. I'll go kill that Azog before we leave. Okay, the giant eagle let out a resounding cry, and before Dewey could react, it plummeted. The overwhelming sense of weightlessness made Dewey's heart leap into his throat. Azog, a survivor, roared with anger and resentment as he watched his men buried beneath the avalanche of rocks. Wizard, I demand blood from you. Are you calling me Azog? A teasing voice boomed from above. Azog, horrified, looked up to see Dewey flying down on a giant eagle. Understanding the disparity in strength, he fled without a word. But Dewey didn't give him another chance. Shattered to pieces, the spell instantly struck Azog. With a scream, Azog's body cracked like shattered porcelain, and black blood gushed out. Even so, Azog still had a breath left. You're so hard to kill, Azog, Dewey sighed, his eyes cold. But no matter what, today is your death. Shattered into pieces, Azog's expression hardened, his bloodshot eyes gradually dimming as he died. Looking at the slain Azog, Dewey breathed a deep sigh. With Azog dead, the trajectory of fate has changed. Who knows if the Battle of the Five Armies will happen again? Dewey, Gandalf flew in on a giant eagle, followed by the others. Upon seeing Azog's body, the dwarves cheered, celebrating the slaying of their mortal enemy. Gandalf was also overjoyed and appreciative. Dewey, you have slain Azog, Lord of the Orcs. This news will soon spread from the Orcs throughout Middle-earth. You will earn the name Enemy of the Orcs, but in return, you will become the enemy of all Orcs. They will be eager to eliminate you. Be prepared, I understand. Thank you for the reminder, Gandalf. Dewey nodded, though he felt no sense of pressure. After killing Azog, the group flew away on their giant eagles. The giant eagles were messengers of Manwë, Lord of the Valar. They were large, intelligent, and able to speak human language. They were responsible for bringing news from all parts of Middle-earth to Manwë and aiding the free folk of Middle-earth in their fight against evil. Gandalf, being one of the Maiar who served under Manwë, had a good relationship with the giant eagles and could summon them for help. The giant eagles were extremely fast, and the group soared over the misty mountains, landing only at the Rock of Car on the Andun River. As for why they didn't just fly them to the lonely mountain, On the one hand, the giant eagles lived in the Misty Mountains and were mainly responsible for monitoring the orcs in the mountains. They were unwilling to leave the Misty Mountains too far. On the other hand, for the same reason as Gandalf, the giant eagles were not allowed to interfere too much in the Central Asian forces, and their main purpose was to help fight against evil. I could only complain speechlessly about this. Isn't this just like in Journey to the West, where everyone had to go through a long journey and all kinds of hardships, instead of letting Sun Wukong fly to the west to retrieve the scriptures? After getting off the giant eagle's back, when Gandalf said goodbye to the Eagle King, I looked at the Eagle King's feather crest and suddenly had an inspiration. He quickly said, "Gandalf, the core of your wand has been missing. Perhaps the giant eagle's feather can be used as your wand core." Chapter 79 Giant Bear. The giant eagle and Gandalf were both under Manwë's command, so perhaps they would be a better match. Otherwise, he could only consider the Balrog in the mines of Moria. But the Balrog was so powerful that Gandalf would perish with it, even if he tried his best. I had no confidence in using the materials from the Balrog to make a wand for Gandalf. He only hoped that the giant eagle's feathers would be compatible with Gandalf, otherwise Gandalf's wand would be a distant dream. The giant eagle could understand human speech, and after hearing I's words, the Eagle King tilted his head, picked up a feather from his tail, and handed it to Gandalf. Gandalf did not refuse the Eagle King's kindness, but smiled and touched his head. "Thank you, my friend." The Eagle King rubbed Gandalf's hand, then spread his wings again and led the giant eagle back to the Misty Mountains. Gandalf gazed at the giant eagle as it flew away, then handed the tail feather to Dewey. "Excuse me, Dewey." Dewey accepted the metallic feather, sensing the rich magic within. He nodded with satisfaction and asked, "How is it, Gandalf? Is this feather suitable? If not, then he would need to consider other core materials." Gandalf nodded and smiled. "It feels good. It doesn't resist my magic." "That's good." Dewey breathed a sigh of relief. "Gandalf, Dewey, come quickly," the dwarves shouted anxiously. "Check on Thorin." "What's wrong with him?" Hearing the dwarves' cries for help, Gandalf and Dewey hurried over. Amidst the dwarves' anxiety, Thorin lay there, still showing no signs of waking. "Let me see," Gandalf said, crouching down. After a careful examination, he saw that Thorin was seriously injured, and his expression darkened. He immediately cast a spell to heal Thorin. "Gandalf, let me do it," Dewey said. He knew Gandalf couldn't cast spells easily, and he didn't want to embarrass him. He pulled out a potion and handed it to the dwarf, Balin. "I have some white savory essence here, perfect for healing wounds. I almost forgot you had a potion, Dewey." "It's much more effective than mine." Gandalf's eyes lit up, and he didn't insist on casting the spell. Balin and the dwarves were overjoyed, frantically applying the white savory essence to Thorin's wounds. Fearing it wouldn't be enough, they grabbed handfuls and smeared it thickly. This pained Dewey's heart. These dwarves were so extravagant, they had no idea how to use it sparingly. White savory essence wasn't easy to make, and he'd already devoured half a bottle in one go. He was truly selling his father's land without any regrets. The white savory essence healed quickly, and Thorin's wounds healed in the blink of an eye. He opened his eyes and awoke. Upon hearing that Azog had been killed by Dewey, Thorin paused for a moment. His grandfather Thor had died at the hands of Azog, and his father, King Thrain II, had also been killed by Azog. His hatred for Azog was deep, and he yearned to slay him. It was a strange surprise that his enemy had died just like that. After accepting this, Thorin solemnly thanked Dewey for killing Azog. He also thanked Bilbo, who would have been dead if Bilbo hadn't stopped Thorin from striking the fatal blow. Thorin's arrogance and stubbornness faded after his sobering moment, and the group became more harmonious than before. They descended the Car Rock and headed south along the Anduin River, preparing to take the old forest road through Mirkwood and toward the Lonely Mountain. However, they soon encountered a large wooden house. Surrounded by a thorn hedge, like a city wall, was a tall wooden gate. The gate opened, revealing numerous wooden buildings, barns, stables, and even a beehive with a bell-shaped thatched roof. A wide path connected the gate to the innermost cabin. The dwarves gazed at the building with curiosity and caution. "Gandalf, is the owner here friend or foe?" Gandalf's expression was grave, and he glanced around cautiously. "Neither, he'll either help us or kill us," they all said, speechless. Then, a moment later, a tremendous movement erupted from the distant forest. Countless bushes were pushed aside like weeds, as if a massive beast were rampaging through the trees. With a deafening roar, a massive black bear, the size of a mountain, appeared. Its massive footsteps pounded like heavy drums, and the earth seemed to shake as it ran. Oh my god, everyone's eyes widened in disbelief. Run, Gandalf shouted, turning and running towards the cabin. Seeing the fierce bear in the distance, everyone didn't hesitate and ran as fast as they could. Seeing this, the bear roared and chased them. In the final moments, everyone narrowly retreated into the house and closed the door. But the dwarves remained apprehensive. They nervously peered out through the cracks, terrified, and cried, "Gandalf, this cabin is no match for the bear's power. What should we do?" Once inside, Gandalf breathed a sigh of relief, his expression relaxed. "Don't worry. Once inside, you'll be safe. He won't attack this house." Bilbo noticed Gandalf referring to the bear. "Gandalf, you know this bear, I think he's the owner of this house," Dui said. "That's why Gandalf said he wouldn't attack a house." Gandalf nodded with a smile. Dui was right. While the bear might be hostile to us, he won't destroy his own house. So as long as we stay here, we'll be safe. Then, as if he were at home, he found a seat and sat down. "Alright, it's getting late. Let's all get some rest. We can deal with everything else tomorrow." Everyone exchanged glances in bewilderment. After all, with a giant bear lurking outside, who could truly rest easy and sleep soundly? Even more surprising, Dui followed Gandalf's lead, expertly transfiguring a sleeping area before comfortably lying down to rest. He appeared unfazed. Seeing this, everyone could only temporarily relax and rest on Dui's mattress. After all, they had been through so much today, and everyone was exhausted. Hogwarts check-in system, locating Bjorn's cabin. "Do you want to check in?" Dui lay on the soft mattress, delighted when the system responded. "Check-in," Dui muttered silently. "Check-in successful. Congratulations on obtaining the Animagus Transfiguration." Animagus Transfiguration? Dui's eyes lit up instantly. This check-in was truly a surprise. Chapter 80 Animagus. Animagus is one of the highest achievements in Transfiguration. It allows a wizard to transform into a specific non-magical animal, allowing them to conceal their identity or go into hiding. To perform the Animagus transformation, a wizard must hold a mandrake leaf in their mouth for a full month, from full moon to full moon. The leaf must not be swallowed or removed from their mouth. If it leaves their mouth, the process must be restarted. On the second full moon, the leaf is removed and placed in a crystal vial filled with saliva, soaking it in the pure moonlight. If the night is overcast, a new mandrake leaf must be found and the process restarted. Into the moonlit crystal vial, a strand of one's own hair and a silver teaspoon of dew, collected from a place that has not been exposed to sunlight or human contact for 7 days, are added. Finally, a chrysalis moth chrysalis is added. The mixture is then placed in a quiet, dark place until the next thunderstorm, when it can be removed. The mandrake leaf must not be viewed or disturbed. The entire process relies heavily on luck, and the wait can stretch to weeks, months, or even years. Therefore, successful Animagus transformation is rare in the magical world. However, Dui was confident in his luck, and after achieving the Animagus transformation, he wondered what animal he could transform into. Dui gazed at the full moon through the skylight, feeling a sense of luck. He immediately pulled a mandrake from his pouch, plucked the tenderest leaf, and placed it under his tongue. While it felt a little strange, it barely affected his speech and eating. Dui then laid down again. After climbing the mountain for so long and fighting so many battles, he was exhausted and ready to fall asleep. As for the giant bear outside, Dui knew it was Bjorn the Skin Changer, a decent man. So, unlike the dwarves, Dui, like Gandalf, relaxed and fell into deep sleep. The next day, everyone woke up one after another. Looking through the crack in the door, the giant bear outside was gone. Only a towering man, wielding an axe, was chopping wood. Seeing this, Gandalf told the dwarves to remain inside until he gave the signal, and then they went out again, 2 by 2. This was simply because the owner of this place had no good feelings towards the dwarves. Then, Dui, and Bilbo went out together. "Gandalf, you look a little nervous," Bilbo asked in confusion. "Nonsense, why would I be nervous?" Gandalf shook his head. Dewey looked at Gandalf with amusement at his uneasiness. Yesterday, they had occupied the house and barred the owner from entering, so now, seeing him, they felt awkward. The three of them approached a 3-meter-tall man. He was extremely tall, with black hair and a thick black beard. His shoulders were broad, and his upper body was exposed. With a swing of his axe, his muscular body bulged, splitting a thick wooden stake in two. The arrival of Duel, Gandalf, and the other two seemed oblivious, chopping wood as they went along. Ahem. Oh, good morning, Gandalf greeted. The man didn't turn around, continuing to chop wood. Good morning, Gandalf shouted again, his voice rising. This time the man paused, turning with his great axe in hand and sternly gazing at them, as if ready to chop them like firewood. Who are you? I'm Gandalf, Gandalf the Grey. This is Duel the Black, and this is Bilbo Baggins. Gandalf introduced them one by one. I've never heard of him, the man said coldly. Without giving them any respect. Gandalf's throat suddenly tightened, and he explained again, perhaps you've heard of Daragist? He lives on the western edge of Mirkwood. What do you want? Just to thank you for your hospitality, Gandalf said without embarrassment. You might have noticed that we took shelter in your room last night, 2 wizards and a halfling. What are you doing here? The man eyed the 3 men with suspicion and scrutiny. Well, it's a long story. It's all the fault of the goblins in the mountains. They've been harassing us for a long time. It was only thanks to Duel that he killed Azog that we were able to get here. Who was killed? The man suddenly became excited and rushed to Gandalf, ready to grab him by the collar and demand questioning. Gandalf quickly stepped back and presented Duel. You heard correctly, Mr. Bjarn. Azog is dead. He was slain yesterday by this black-robed wizard, Duel. Bjarn's gaze instantly shifted to Duel, his sharp, feral eyes fixed on him. Is what he said true? Duel shrugged, his eyes meeting his own without hesitation. You can't lie about something like that. After all, lies are easily exposed, aren't they? Bjarn stared at him intently for a long moment before retracting his oppressive aura and offering a rather unflattering smile. I believe you, the goblins, and I have a grudge. You killed their leader, so you are my friend. At this moment, the dwarves in the house mistakenly thought they had received a signal from Gandalf and came out in groups of 2. Bjarn, who had been kind before, suddenly changed his expression and grabbed his great axe and looked at the dwarves fiercely. You brought dwarves with you? Well, I have something to confess. There are actually some of us who are dwarves, Gandalf explained awkwardly. How many do you call these dwarves? Bjarn questioned. Actually, there are only 13 dwarves, not many, but in the end, Bjarn did not attack the dwarves. I hate the dwarves, their greed and blindness, but I hate the orcs even more. My people were the first inhabitants of the mountains, but the orcs came down from the north, and Azog the Defiler nearly slew my family. Now I am the only one left. You are hunted by the orcs, but the enemy of my enemy is my friend. I allow you to stay here. Bjarn invited them back to his house and treated them to bread, milk, and honey. Unlike the dwarves, who were somewhat aloof, Bjarn was very friendly to Dewey, inviting him to sit closest to him. He patiently asked Dewey about his story of killing Azog. Gandalf, sitting on Bjarn's other side, occasionally added to the story. Through their conversation, Dewey gradually came to understand Bjarn better. Bjarn could not only transform into a giant bear but also communicate with animals through his growls. So, throughout the manor, besides him, there were also several animal servants, including 4 white horses, several greyhounds, a large charcoal black ram, and several snow-white sheep. There were also cows, chickens, mice, bees, and so on, all obeying Bjarn's orders, each with their own orderly duties. It was like a kingdom of animals. Everyone was astonished by the scene, and Dewey was particularly envious. Bjarn's abilities were very similar to those of the legendary druids. Not only could he transform into a giant bear, but he could also communicate with animals. However, he had only mastered Parseltongue, far inferior to Bjarn's abilities. More importantly, Dewey had begun practicing animagus transfiguration, but even if he succeeded, he would only transform into an ordinary animal. Bjarn's giant bear, on the other hand, was not only enormous, but also immensely powerful and formidable, surpassing the capabilities of ordinary bears. If the opportunity arose, Dewey would love to study the secrets of Bjarn's bear transformation. Could he combine it with his own animagus, becoming the first wizard ever to transform into a magical animal? Of course, the prerequisite is that he first successfully masters the animagus transformation. Chapter 81 Gandalf's Wand. At Bjarn's invitation, the group stayed an extra day. During this time, Dewey began working on Gandalf's wand. The vine wood for the wand's body had already been carved, and the only missing core had been found. The other gums, varnishes, and other materials were also already prepared. Under Gandalf's expectant gaze, Dewey carefully prepared the eagle's tail feather, carefully and evenly placing it with tweezers into the hollow of the vine wood. He then poured resin into the hole, completely fusing the core and the wand. Finally, he polished it, and inscribed the ancient magic runes on the end. Thus, a complete wand was formed. At midnight, as the moon reached its zenith, Dewey waved his wand, chanting a complex and lengthy mystical spell. Moonlight, like a silver mist, gathered from the tip of the wand and flowed into it, fully awakening it. Feeling the wand in his hand, as if it had come to life, Dewey smiled with satisfaction. He handed the wand to the eager Gandalf. 12 inches long, with a vine wood shaft, it's perfect for wizards with lofty aspirations, a secretive spirit, and extraordinary foresight. The core, made of eagle feathers, grants the wand exceptional speed, making it ideal for performing a variety of offensive or powerful spells, and ensuring its loyalty to its owner. Gandalf, give it a try, Dewey urged. This was his first time crafting a wand for someone else, and he was eagerly anticipating it. Gandalf took the wand, gripping it in his hand, his face equally filled with anticipation. With a gentle wave, he unleashed his mastery of light magic. Instantly, the wand's tip shone with dazzling light, illuminating Gandalf's smiling face. What a wonderful feeling. It's like my arm has been extended, making magic easier and more effortless. Dewey, seeing this, felt a surge of delight and satisfaction. He now somewhat understood Ollivander's feelings. Seeing a wand he crafted find a suitable owner always brings a sense of satisfaction. This wand was made a bit hastily. Use it for now. I'll make you a better one later when I have the chance. Dewey, not entirely satisfied with the finished wand, assured Gandalf. According to his wandmaker, the Eagle King's tail feathers, while useful, weren't the best for Gandalf. Even the vinewood shaft was made from a common horn branch, so this one was only passable. Dewey thought that if he found a better magical tree, such as the White Tree or the Maelstrom, a descendant of the two trees, he could try making another one for Gandalf. As for the core, if he was strong enough, he could even consider the Balrog from the mines of Moria. After all, both were fire attributed, and he was a future mortal enemy. Perhaps it was truly the destined core for his wand. Gandalf, however, didn't have many demands. He played with the wand in his hand, enjoying it greatly. He shook his head with a look of delight. Don't bother, Doyle. This wand is perfectly fine. He waved his wand, unleashing gusts of wind, flames, light, lightning, and more. His eyes lit up the more he played, and in a voice only the two of them could hear, he said cryptically, "Thank you, Doyle. I can feel that whenever I cast spells with this wand, the constraints on me are much less." Doyle, understanding Gandalf's words, widened his eyes in disbelief. "Are you sure, Gandalf?" Gandalf was bound by the restrictions of the Valar, preventing him from using magic excessively. But now, with the wand he'd crafted, he was free from those restrictions? Was his wand truly that magical? "It's true," Gandalf nodded with a smile. "While I can't cast powerful spells, I've removed some of the limitations on ordinary magic." "Congratulations, Gandalf," Doyle confirmed, congratulating him sincerely. He looked forward to seeing Gandalf in the future, wand in hand and sword in hand. After completing Gandalf's wand, Dewey, with Beorn's permission, magically connected his fireplace to the flue network. He also gave him a small sachet of flue powder and invited him to visit Witherdop in the future. Beorn was amazed by the powder's power and gladly accepted Dewey's invitation. The group didn't linger long, and after breakfast the next day, they set out again. As they said goodbye, Beorn lent them horses, which would take them to the edge of Mirkwood. He also shared some bad news with Gandalf. An army of orcs had recently been gathering in the area of Dol Guldur, at the southern end of Mirkwood, and there were even sightings of the ring-wraiths. Upon hearing this, Gandalf's face was grave, and he remained silent. Only after the group had said goodbye to Beorn and ridden across the wilderness to the edge of Mirkwood did Gandalf suddenly propose to depart elsewhere, temporarily parting ways. Everyone was stunned and puzzled. Thorin frowned, his attitude once again cold. To him, nothing was more important than reaching the lonely mountain. Gandalf's actions, he considered, were a betrayal. Dewey wasn't surprised. After all, Gandalf had warned him of this possibility before they set out. Coupled with the information provided by Dargist and Beorn, his departure only now surprised him. After all, for Gandalf, The purpose of organizing the expedition was to prevent the dragon smog and the orcs from threatening the situation in Middle-earth. With the orcs gathering in Dol Guldur, and even the ring wraiths appearing there, the situation was far more serious than the Lonely Mountain. Therefore, he had to go to Dol Guldur to investigate. Dewey hesitated. Should he tell Gandalf directly that Sauron was there, and even that he had regained his strength? He remembered that Gandalf had been trapped in Dol Guldur by Sauron during his journey, imprisoned and tortured. He was only freed by members of the White Council. Gandalf, have you considered this a trap? Dewey hesitantly warned. Orcs are gathering in Dol Guldur, and the ring wraiths are also lurking there. Their master is likely hiding there. They are numerous and powerful. If you go alone, you'll likely be trapped. Thank you for your warning, Dewey, Gandalf said solemnly. It's precisely because it's likely a trap that I need to go there. If we can prove that the necromancer is Sauron, it will alert the various forces in Middle-earth and allow them to unite once again to prevent the resurgence of darkness. Then he changed the subject and winked at Dewey. So I invite you to come with me to Dol Guldur. I believe that with the two of us together, even if we are defeated, we can retreat safely from there. What? I'm going with you. Dewey's eyes widened, wondering if he had misheard. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 82 Goodbye Brown Robe Wizard. That's right, Gandalf nodded in the affirmative. I have a feeling that going with you this time will go much more smoothly, perhaps even without danger. Dewey expressed doubt about Gandalf's premonition. He knew his own business. Even Gandalf was no match for Sauron. Adding a weakling like him would only give him more trouble. Gandalf, how about we contact some helpers, such as Lord Elrond and Lady Galadriel? It's too late. Gandalf shook his head. Bjarn says the orcs have been gathering in Dol Guldur these past few days. They must be planning something big. We must investigate immediately and prepare before Lady Galadriel and the others arrive. No, Gandalf, there's still time, Dewey said with a confident smile. He pulled a bottle of flu powder from his space bag and shook it. Did you forget I still have this? Dewey never fought a battle unprepared. Knowing the dangers of Dol Guldur, he didn't want to risk it alone. He and Gandalf would face the powerful Lord Sauron. I've linked Bjarn's fireplace to the Flu network, connecting it directly to the hearth in Rivendell. We can return to Bjarn's home now, use the fireplace to reach Rivendell, and request reinforcements from Lord Elrond. Although Galadriel couldn't be contacted for the time being able to reach Elrond would be a powerful aid and a source of confidence. Especially since Rivendell wasn't home to only the powerful elf Elrond. Glorfindel, Lord of the Golden Flower, whom he had only met once before, was no less powerful than Elrond. Hearing Dewey's words, Gandalf suddenly realized something and slapped his head in frustration. As I age, my mind becomes rigid, unable to keep up with the agility of you young minds, but we don't have to return to Bjarn's house. I have a better idea, Gandalf offered. Before we reach Dol Guldur, we need to visit an old friend. His home is in the southern forest of Greenwood the Great, even closer to Dol Guldur. We could borrow his hearth to travel to Rivendell. Are you talking about Aragaster the Brown? Dewey accepted Gandalf's invitation, separated from the Fellowship, and joined him on the expedition to Dol Guldur. Thorin expressed strong disapproval. I don't agree, Thorin objected fiercely, looking at Gandalf with angry eyes. You can leave, but Dwar must stay with us. I don't care what orcs or necromancers there are in Dol Guldur. That has nothing to do with us going to the Lonely Mountain. The only and most important thing for us is to reach the Lonely Mountain before Durin's Day, and then get the Arkenstone and take back the Lonely Mountain. Dwar was a little helpless with the angry Thorin, and explained earnestly, Thorin, I promise you, we will meet up with you before you reach the Lonely Mountain. Dol Guldur is related to the situation in the entire Middle-earth. We need to go and find out clearly to prevent the dark forces from rising again and prevent it from affecting your retaking of the Lonely Mountain. But Thorin obviously did not accept such an argument. He snorted stubbornly, what situation in Middle-earth? Those have nothing to do with us. I just want to get the Arkenstone and take back my kingdom. Then he stared straight at Dwar, gritted his teeth and threatened, Dwar, are you sure you want to go with him? Don't forget that you signed a contract with me. Do you want to break the contract? Dewey was also troubled by Thorin, who was obsessed with restoring his kingdom. I promise to help you retake the Lonely Mountain, and I will not break my promise. We will reunite with you before the day of Durin and help you defeat the dragon and reclaim the Lonely Mountain." Seeing Dewey's resolute attitude, Thorin's face darkened. "I hope so. If you don't fulfill the contract, you won't take a single copper from me." The two parties parted on bad terms. Dewey and Gandalf headed south to Dol Guldur, while Thorin and his companions prepared to head east through the Old Forest Road. Bilbo preferred to follow Dewey and Gandalf rather than the dwarves, but Gandalf dissuaded him from following the dwarves. After separating from the expedition, Dewey and Gandalf rode south along the Anduin River until they came to Greenwood the Great, the southernmost point of Mirkwood, and stopped. After releasing their horses, they followed a path into the forest. At the end of the road, a stone and wood cabin nestled in the woods looked as if no one had ever cleaned it. The thatched roof was overgrown with weeds, the stones were covered in moss, and mushrooms sprouted from the wood. If it weren't for the smoke rising from the chimney, one would have thought it was an abandoned, deserted hut. The wooden door opened from the inside, and the brown-robed wizard Daragast emerged, a look of surprise on his face. "Gandalf. What brings you here, Daragast?" Gandalf greeted with a smile. "Deer and I were just passing through, so we stopped by to pay you a visit." "Are you welcome?" "Of course you are. Come in," Daragast said warmly, his eyes lighting up as he looked at Dewey. "I remember you, young wizard, the one who helped me lead away the orcs and wargs last time. It's nice to see you again." Dewey nodded with a smile. Inviting the two into the cabin, Daragast warmly poured them a pot of tea brewed from an unknown herb. Dewey took a sip. The taste was bitter, similar to the traditional Chinese medicine of his previous life. However, his eyes lit up. The tea actually contained magical power, quickly alleviating the fatigue of the long journey. Hogwarts check-in system, locating Daragaster the Brown's hut in Mirkwood. "Do you want to check in?" The system suddenly prompted a message. Dewey's eyes lit up with joy. He hadn't expected such an unexpected discovery here. "Check-in, sign-in successful. Congratulations on obtaining the herbal knowledge of Professor Sprout, the master herbologist." Countless pieces of knowledge on the cultivation, planting, gathering, and crafting of magical herbs were imprinted in his mind, as if someone had used the memory charm to force someone else's knowledge into his brain, waiting for him to digest and absorb it, and become a master herbologist. Dewey was ecstatic. He had originally considered comparing the magical herbs from Harry Potter's world with those in this world once his knowledge of herbology reached a certain level, finding similar substitutes to create more potions. Unexpectedly, he was immediately met with a complete knowledge of herbal medicine from Professor Sprout, the master herbologist. He took another sip of the herbal tea, and instantly his mind flashed with the corresponding magical herbs. Daragast sensed Dewey's joy and assumed he enjoyed his brew. He felt like he had found a soulmate, and happily poured Dewey another full bowl of tea. Dewey, who had consumed Chinese medicine in his previous life, dismissed it as a minor issue. Gandalf looked at him with admiration, and he drank it all in one gulp, then proactively inquired about the herb. As the most expert in herbal medicine among the 5 wizards, seeing Dewey's interest, Daragast readily shared his knowledge. As a Maya, the lesser god of the plant goddess Yavanna, Daragast was deeply versed in the properties and effects of various herbs in Middle-earth, and Dewey benefited greatly from his guidance. Daragast, in turn, was amazed and delighted by Dewey. Dewey's ingenious ideas and uses of herbs sparked a wave of inspiration, and he quickly became his close friend. The two of them were discussing animatedly, oblivious to the others, until Gandalf, with a few helpless coughs, interrupted them. "Oh, sorry, I almost forgot you were here, Gandalf," Daragast said apologetically to his old friend, then remembered to ask, "By the way, what are you doing here?" Chapter 83 Return to the Valley. "We learned from Bjorn that the orcs have been gathering in Dol Guldur recently, so we are going there to investigate," Gandalf explained. Hearing Gandalf's words, Daragast showed a lingering fear and hurriedly tried to dissuade him. "Don't go. I felt a very powerful dark force enveloping me there, even I was frightened. Now that force has spread to the Great Greenwood, and countless dark creatures have been attracted to it. It has become even more dangerous there, then we must go," Gandalf said firmly. "The darkness has appeared again, and we must know its true face so that the people of Middle-earth can wake up and guard against the darkness's invasion again, and I'm not unprepared. Don't I have helpers, Yuanwar? No, this is too dangerous." Daragast shook his head frantically. "You have no idea how terrifying that dark force is. Even if you two join forces, You are no match at all. Of course it's not just us, Gandalf said with a smile. We came here to ask for your help. Me? No, Gandalf, you know me, I can't fight at all, and if it weren't for me to boost their morale and destroy my own prestige, even if the three of us join forces, we might not be able to get out of there safely. Dargist shook his head, his face full of disapproval. It's not wise to walk into a trap knowing it's a trap, Gandalf. Don't be so quick to refuse, my old friend, Gandalf advised. In fact, Dwar shares your opinion, so we plan to find more allies to join us in conquering Dol Guldur. Allies? Which allies? Dargist asked doubtfully. Gandalf looked at Dwar. Dwar nodded, stood up, and walked towards the fireplace. Dargist, may I borrow your fireplace? Borrow your fireplace? Dargist was even more puzzled, but nodded. Please, Gandalf smiled mysteriously as he watched Dwar wave his wand and mutter something to the fireplace. Alright, Dwar put away his wand and pulled out a glass bottle filled with glitter powder. He smiled at the two men, saying, time is running out. We should set off. Gandalf stood up first and took a handful of flue powder from the bottle. He walked to the fireplace and threw it into the fire, instantly turning the flames green. Rivendell, Gandalf shouted as he stepped into the green flames. The next moment, the flames engulfed Gandalf, carrying him away in an instant. Darricaster, his eyes wide open, watched the scene unfold. He hurried over, searching carefully, then turned back to Dui. Where's Gandalf? Where did he go? Didn't you hear? Rivendell, Dui replied with a smile, holding the bottle out to him. Grab a handful. Remember to call out the name of the place when you throw it down, or it could easily be transported to another hearth. Darricaster grabbed a handful of flue powder and marveled at the shimmering powder in his hand. If Dui hadn't stopped him, he would have tried to taste it. Finally, under Dui's guidance, he walked to the hearth with the flue powder, threw it at his feet, and called out Rivendell's name. After watching Darricaster disappear in the flames, Dui followed him into the hearth and threw a handful of flue powder. Rivendell, the world spun, and during his teleportation, Dewey even caught sight of Beyond's fireplace window, catching a glimpse of his towering figure in the living room. Before he could finish his thought, his feet touched solid ground again. PFFT, clean up, Dewey spat out the ashes and immediately cast a cleansing spell on himself. This flue powder was incredibly reliable and convenient, its only drawback being that it always left a mess. Gandalf, Darricaster, and Elrond were already waiting outside the fireplace. Dui, clean up Darricaster and me too, Gandalf said with a grin. It's truly rude to appear before Lord Elrond so grimy. Dewey waved his wand, cleaned up both him and the slightly overexcited Darricaster, and then nodded to the smiling Elrond. Lord Elrond, it's been a long time since we last met. Welcome back to Rivendell, Wizard Dwar. Elrond's demeanor was elegant and noble, his smile gentle. Time flies. It seems only yesterday since you left, and to meet you again today is a wonderful surprise. I've heard from Gandalf that you came from Mirkwood. 1,000 miles away, yet you've arrived in an instant. Your magic, Wizard Dwar, truly astonishes me. Lord Elrond is kind. After some pleasantries, everyone got down to business. Gandalf explained his purpose and recounted the current situation in Dol Guldur. Darricaster also provided additional evidence. Hearing the information provided by Gandalf and Darricaster, Elrond's expression grew serious. Unlike Saruman, who was stubborn and prejudiced against Gandalf, he believed Gandalf's words and immediately accepted his invitation to travel to Dol Guldur. Before setting out, however, he hesitated. This matter is of grave importance. Should we send a message to Lady Galadriel and Saruman, especially since Saruman was the leader of the White Council? Not explaining the situation might anger him. Gandalf pondered for a moment before nodding. Of course we should, but the journey is long, and Saruman doesn't have flue like we do. It's only natural that he wouldn't receive the message until we reach Dol Guldur. Right, Gandalf said innocently, with a calculated smile. Elrond acquiesced. He knew that Saruman and Gandalf had a conflicting aura. At the last White Council, Saruman had rejected a request to visit Dol Guldur. Neither he nor Galadriel could oppose Saruman's decision, but they were more inclined to Gandalf's opinion. Furthermore, as the bearer of the 3 rings of the Elven Kings, he naturally had a close relationship with Galadriel and Gandalf. Dewey also offered a suggestion. Lord Elrond, not only are orcs gathered in large numbers in Dol Guldur, but ring wraiths are also present. Their master may even be hiding there. As a precaution, Could we invite more people, such as Lord Glorfindel of Rivendell, to guard against a more powerful enemy? I cannot make the decision for Glorfindel. This matter requires his advice. Elrond hesitated to agree immediately. As an elf reborn and sent to Middle-earth by the Valar, Glorfindel held a special status, and even Elrond, the Lord of Rivendell, respected him. To everyone's delight, Glorfindel ultimately accepted the invitation and decided to join them in their quest to destroy the darkness. Glorfindel's presence instilled greater confidence in the mission. Once everyone arrived, Dewey began distributing flue powder and explaining its use. Daragast's hut, with rising green flames and a voice, the crowds began to clamor. Everyone disappeared from the fireplace one after another and was teleported to Daragast's wooden house in the Mirkwood. Chapter 84 Dorgad. Dol Guldur, located at the southern tip of Mirkwood, was once a long-abandoned fortress. However, ever since a mysterious necromancer took possession of the area, a powerful dark force has enveloped the area, haunting orcs, wraiths, giant spiders, and other dark creatures. It has become a demonic den, and no one dares approach. One day, Dewey, Gandalf, Daragast, Elrond, and Glorfindel quietly arrived at Dol Guldur, avoiding the dense swarms of orcs outside the fortress and infiltrating the castle. All five were under the disillusionment spell cast by Dewey, so they encountered no major obstacles along the way. However, the closer they approached the castle, the stronger the dark force grew, and their expressions grew increasingly solemn. It seems we have been deceived all along. Elrond, dressed in armor, drew his elven sword from his waist, his expression wary and solemn. The enemy of darkness has returned once more. The glorious Glorfindel also drew a magnificent longsword, its blade covered in undulating golden filigree patterns, instantly transforming from a refined elven noble into a fierce warrior. Dewey, Gandalf, and Daragast all raised their wands and staffs, vigilantly scanning their surroundings for any danger. The five of them entered the castle, surveying the deserted surroundings without daring to relax. Gandalf struck the ground with his staff and chanted, "Evil lurks here, and I command you to reveal yourself." A magical halo of detection spread, but the surroundings remained unchanged. It seemed as if it were simply an abandoned fortress. But none of those present were foolish enough to be deceived by such an illusion. Instead, their vigilance grew even stronger. After all, being able to evade Gandalf's detection magic only proved that the enemy hidden in the shadows was even more powerful. Gandalf refused to give up, continuing his detection magic, trying to force the hidden figure out. Suddenly, the surroundings grew cold and dim, and a chilling, oppressive force overtook them, bringing a heavy, oppressive feeling that made breathing seem suffocating. 9 armored undead figures emerged from the void. They resembled shadows, their armor a shadowy void. Wielding Morgul blades, they exuded a dark and powerful aura. They were none other than the Nazgul, the Ringwraiths. The Ringwraiths were once the 9 most powerful human kings. In the Second Age, Sauron, disguised as Anadar, the Lord of Gifts, gifted them with 9 rings imbued with his dark power. The rings granted them near immortality, but they were gradually corrupted and degraded by the dark power within. Ultimately, they lost their true selves and became servants of the Dark Lord Sauron, controlled by him. 9 Ringwraiths descended upon the group from all sides, their dark curses like the whispers of the dead lingering in their ears, attempting to corrode their souls. "You should never have awakened," Elrond declared with authority, his elven sword unleashing a powerful brilliance. Glorfindel radiated a dazzling, holy light. Bathed in the light of the 2 trees, his aura contrasted with the surrounding darkness. "Servants of Mordor, this is not your territory. Return to the underworld." The Ringwraiths retreated, yet, seemingly emboldened, they charged forward again, attacking the group. Gandalf, Elrond, Daragast, and Glorfindel each took on 2 Ringwraiths. The remaining Ringwraith, the Witch King of Angmar, chose Dewey as his target. "We meet again, young wizard. This time, you will not escape." The sharp, deep voice of the dead emanated from the hollow, dark helm. Dewey, as if facing a formidable foe, waved his wand without further ado. Shattered to pieces, the dazzling spell pierced the Witch King of Angmar's ethereal form, as if it were a mere shadow. He chuckled in a low, triumphant tone, "Wizard, your spells have no effect on me." He raised his Morgul blade and slashed at Dewey. Expecto Patronus, a silvery white mist imbued with sacred light erupted from the tip of his wand, condensing into a massive owl. With wings spread and sharp claws extended, it struck the Witch King of Angmar. The owl's swift and agile form dodged the Morgul's blade and slashed fiercely at the Witch King's shoulder. With a sharp, piercing scream, a noticeable wound was left on the Witch King's shoulder. The patroness of white magic was a natural nemesis of dark forces, and the light-filled magic corroded the wound, causing pain. The owl patroness continued its assault, attacking the Witch King of Angmar, inflicting more wounds. Wisps of black energy dissipated from the wounds, steadily weakening the Witch King's power. But as the leader of the Ring Wraiths, the Witch King of Angmar was no easy task. Before the owl patroness could inflict more wounds, a Morgul blade, imbued with the sinister power of a curse, pierced the owl patroness. The owl patroness uttered a mournful wail before dissipating into silver mist. The Witch King of Angmar's vacant gaze fixed on Dewey. "Wizard, I will pierce your heart with a Morgul blade and transform you into my servant, a Ring Wraith." Dewey's face paled slightly after his patroness was slain, but he showed no fear or panic in the face of the powerful attack from the Witch King. With a wave of his wand, golden notes flew out, playing a joyful melody. This melody, imbued with positive energy, was an inspiring and exhilarating sound for Dewey's followers. But to the Ring Wraiths, the noise was an unpleasant one, disrupting their thinking and weakening their strength. Instantly, the tide of attack and defense shifted, with Gandalf and his men quickly gaining the upper hand and overwhelming the Ring Wraiths. Expecto Patronus, Dewey cast his patronus once more. From his wand sprang an owl patronus, vastly larger than the previous one, almost the size of a giant eagle. The owl patronus spread its massive wings, its feathers flaring in streams of silver light. It extended its razor-sharp talons, striking back Morgul's blade, then grasped the Witch King of Angmar, clinging to it in midair. The giant owl patronus, in tune with Dewey's mind, seized the Witch King and flew towards him. He was met by a silver-white spear, its tip gleaming with a brilliant light. Wielding the divine spear, Egress, Dewey, with the patroness's aid, pierced the Witch King's hollow, dark form. The divine spear, imbued with immense destructive power, instantly shredded the spirit of the Witch King of Angmar, dissolving it into thin air. Having vanished his opponent, Dewey breathed a sigh of relief. Seeing the others still engaged in battle with the Ring Wraiths, he quickly manipulated his patroness to attack the others, aiding his companions. Soon, they had dispatched them one by one. But sensing the dark power surrounding them, which remained undiminished, their expressions grew even more vigilant and solemn. Now that the servants had been dealt with, the next challenge lay with their masters. Chapter 85 Demon King Soren. Hogwarts Sign-In System, locating Dol Guldur. Do you want to sign in? Before Soren even appeared, the sign-in system responded. Sign in, Dewey muttered silently. Sign in successful. Congratulations on receiving secrets of the cutting-edge dark arts. Dewey's heart trembled as he gazed at the dark magic book before him. He hadn't expected to sign in and receive something like this. Although it wasn't the time to read, Dewey couldn't help but devote a portion of his attention to secretly flipping through the contents. The Imperious Curse, the Cruciatus Curse, the Killing Curse, the Fiendish Fire Curse, and even Horcrux Crafting. The more Dewey read, the more he was struck. The rewards of this sign-in were immense. It encompassed nearly all of the most powerful dark arts in the wizarding world. If he could fully master them, his power would undoubtedly be transformed. However, his immediate focus was on the Killing Curse. As one of the 3 unforgivable curses, the Killing Curse inflicted death, unstoppable by any magic. It was the most dangerous and deadly dark magic in the wizarding world. But it's also the easiest dark magic to learn. It requires no complex casting conditions, all it requires is the most extreme and intense emotion, using malice and murderous sentiment to mobilize magical power, and successfully cast the Killing Curse. The power of the Killing Curse depends on the malice and magical power of the caster. However, before Dewey could observe further, a terrifying dark force surged from all directions, a mighty wave threatening to crush them. Gandalf quickly used his staff to erect a vast holy light barrier to protect them. The undulating holy light barrier felt like a bubble on a surging sea, perilous at any moment. Gandalf, let me help you. For the first time, Daragus displayed the power of the brown-robed wizard. His staff unleashed another holy light barrier, adding to Gandalf's, making it even more sturdy. Glorfindel unleashed immense power and dazzling holy light, tearing a vast rift from the darkness. A ray of sunlight streamed down from the murky sky, illuminating the crowd and blocking the encroaching darkness. Elrond, in turn, chanted the ancient and mysterious elven language, controlling the element of wind. A hurricane of wind swept through the castle caverns, determined to uncover the enemy hidden within. "He's hiding there." Elrond's sharp gaze instantly fell upon the tallest, ruined tower. The hurricane quickly rushed towards it. "Thunderbolt, do we cast a spell upon the tower without a word?" With a mighty explosion, the tower was shattered by the hurricane and explosion. The falling rocks revealed the enemy hidden within. A massive crimson flame erupted from within, emitting a scorching heat and a malevolent aura, coalescing into an immense, flaming eye with a vertical pupil. "You cannot defeat me." Darkness rises again. Your glimmer of light, isolated and insignificant in the darkness, dark old words, a voice filled with evil, bewitching, and corrupting voices echoed around the crowd. The 9 ring wraiths, who had been defeated by them, rose again from the giant flaming eye and surrounded them from all sides. Within the eye's vertical pupil, a dark emptiness filled the void. A towering figure emerged, unleashing a powerful and terrifying dark force that bombarded the holy light barrier erected by Gandalf and Aragaster like a tidal wave. The holy light barrier was crumbling. The sky was plunged into darkness, as if swallowing all light. Dui felt a terrifying, suffocating, oppressive feeling. Countless evil voices seemed to be tempting him, trying to corrode and corrupt his soul. He hurriedly summoned his patroness to his side. Enveloped by the patroness's power, he finally had a chance to breathe, like a man finally emerging from the water after a long period of suffocation, breathing in deep breaths. At the same time, he felt a warm energy in his chest pocket. Dui's eyes lit up, and he quickly pulled a handkerchief from his pocket. Opening it, he saw 5 strands of silvery golden hair nestled within. They were the very hair Galadriel had gifted him. He braided 2 of the golden strands into a bracelet with his wand and wore it on his right hand. Galadriel's hair, imbued with the radiance of the 2 trees, instantly shielded him from the dark forces that were eroding his mind, rendering him unaffected. Dui breathed a sigh of relief as he watched Gandalf, Aragaster, Elrond, and Glorfindel successfully repel Sauron's attack. It was thanks to the powerful aid of Elrond, Glorfindel, and Aragaster. Otherwise, Gandalf and himself would have been in danger. The age of the elves has ended, the age of the orcs has begun. You are retreating, and I shall be the victor. Dark old words. The giant flaming eye erupted with even greater fire, and from the dark void of the vertical pupil, the towering figure emerged. An evil aura and terrifying dark power surrounded him. Clad in dark, sinister armor, his figure towered and indistinct, shrouded in black mist and flames. Everyone was shocked and incredulous at Sauron's true form. Aragaster exclaimed in horror, "He has a form. Has he truly been resurrected? How is that possible? He cannot take form unless he has regained the One Ring." Elrond refused to believe. Gandalf shook his head gravely. "Relax, Aragaster. He has not truly returned to form, or we would have been defeated long ago, decades ago." Thrain, the last of the 7 rings, was captured by orcs and imprisoned in Dol Guldur. I believe he obtained the 7 rings at that time and gained some of their power. Sauron's appearance startled everyone, and the power he displayed was unsettling. As Sauron approached, the powerful dark force forced the holy light barrier to shrink. With Sauron's powerful blow, the barrier of holy light was broken. Gandalf and Aragaster were exhausted and unable to fight again. "Sauron, servant of Morgoth, your opponent is me." Glorfindel unleashed a mighty holy force, confronting Sauron's dark power. As the reborn Lord of the Golden Flower, he possessed pure magic power comparable to that of the Maiar and was one of the most powerful elves in Middle-earth. Now facing the returned Sauron, he remained undefeated. "Glorfindel, elf reborn, I wonder if after the slaying of you, you will have a chance to be reborn again." Dark old words. Sauron's mocking voice echoed around them, carrying a terrifying power. As he spoke, an even more terrifying force struck Glorfindel, forcing him back several steps and dimming his light. Elrond, meanwhile, was besieged by the 9 ring wraiths and unable to provide any support. Chapter 86 Avada Kedavra. "Duir, lend me your flaming sword." Seeing Glorfindel at a disadvantage, Gandalf shouted to Duir. Without hesitation, Duir drew his sword from his ethereal pouch and tossed it to him. Gandalf caught it swiftly, and its blade instantly ignited with flames like the sun, divine, dazzling, and blazing. "Evil spirit, cease. I am a servant of the secret fire, wielder of the blaze of Arnor. Evil spirit, cease. The dark fire cannot smite me, wicked filth fire. Return to the void, where you belong. No evil spirit can overcome me." Gandalf rose again, his flaming sword ablaze with the sun's fire, incinerating the surrounding dark forces. The sacred flames drove back Soren, confronting the dark fire he had unleashed. May the Valar appear here and banish the darkness. Daragus also rose again, releasing holy light to join the battle. Suddenly, Glorfindel, Gandalf, and Dalagus joined forces to confront the Dark Lord Sauron. The two sides were evenly matched, and the aftermath of the battle caused the massive castle fortress to crumble and shatter. Dewey, knowing he was the weakest, did not hinder his comrades and instead commanded his Patronus to attack the Ringwraiths. "Lord Elrond, I will hold the Ringwraiths back, while you help Gandalf and the others," Dewey shouted to Elrond. Knowing the battle was fleeting, Elrond, having escaped the Ringwraiths, immediately joined the siege against Sauron. Dewey was left alone to face the 9 eager Ringwraiths, and the pressure surged. The Ringwraiths were not overpowering, their only difficulty was their indestructibility, or rather their ability to constantly resurrect. Every time a Ringwraith was killed, it would soon resurrect from the eye and attack again. Fortunately, the Patronus of white magic had a counter-effect against these dark creatures. Dewey didn't engage the Ringwraiths, instead constantly harassing and ambushing them with his Patronus, denying them the opportunity to reinforce their master. The Ringwraiths, no fools, saw Dewey's intentions and attacked him simultaneously. Killing him would eliminate the Patronus restraining them. 5 of the Ringwraiths held back Dewey's Patronus, while the other 4 charged fiercely. Dewey remained unfazed, clutching his divine spear, Egress, ready to meet his enemy. But a moment later, as the Ringwraiths were about to reach Dewey, 4 sharp blades shot out from Dewey's pockets and instantly pierced the 4 Ringwraiths. The blades were so fast, and so unexpected, that they gave the Ringwraiths no time to react, piercing their forms. Once they realized what they were, they saw they were 4 daggers. No, the Ringwraiths screamed in agony, their forms severely wounded, their dark magic shattered by the daggers. The Ringwraith's body rapidly twisted and collapsed inward, then exploded, unleashing a massive shockwave that instantly destroyed the surrounding buildings. These were the 4 daggers Dewey had retrieved from the Barrow Downs. Forged by the Dunedain of the North, they were weapons specifically designed to combat the forces of evil, engraved with inscriptions that would bring doom upon Mordor. Now used against the Ringwraiths, they finally unleashed their full power. The Ringwraiths struck by the daggers had their malevolent power shattered, preventing them from being resurrected by Sauron's eye for a short period. Dewey's pressure was instantly relieved. The remaining 5 Ringwraiths, observing the 4 daggers hovering around Dewey, were filled with fear and dread, daring not to approach. Sauron, his master, naturally sensed the loss of 4 of his men. The massive eye turned toward Dewey, radiating an evil, dark spiritual force. "Young wizard, I know you. You killed the orc servants I once relied on. I see a hidden desire within you, a longing for great power. I can grant you great power, teach you to forge a ring of power, grant you immortality, even dominion over the world, if you submit to me." A demonic voice, filled with bewitching, corrupting, and depraved thoughts, echoed in Dewey's ears, attempting to invade his mind and twist his heart. Dewey struggled, his braided hair radiating light to shield his heart as he fiercely fought Sauron's mental erosion. Even so, his mind was inevitably swayed by his influence, swarming with maddening negativity. Only within his heart remained a remnant of calm and rationality. He looked up and saw a flicker of triumph and mockery in the demonic eye, as if it had foreseen his fall, corruption, and his own manipulation. Dewey's heart was filled with endless resentment and rage. As his defenses gradually retreated, a mad idea occurred to him. His mind was now suffused with negative emotions by Sauron's evil power. Why not exploit this emotion and turn the tables? Instantly, the contents of advanced dark magic revealed he had read flash through his mind, becoming clearer than ever. He raised his wand and aimed it at the eye, allowing himself to be consumed by negativity, transforming it into endless malice. Retaining only a last shred of clarity, he roared out in a rage, "Avada Kedavra!" Instantly, a dazzling green light, emanating an aura of utter darkness, destruction, and devastation, illuminated the clouds above, instantly striking the eye with ominous force and curse. Sauron, who was battling Gandalf, Elrond, and the others, froze in his tracks. The dark forces around him, without his will, became chaotic and disordered. With a piercing scream of agony, Sauron seemed to have suffered a severe blow, his hideous armor warping. Elrond seized the opportunity, unleashing a powerful force and piercing the hollow, dark void of Sauron's helmet. Sauron's towering form could no longer sustain itself, disintegrating into black mist and flames, instantly disappearing into the eye. The massive, flaming eye suddenly dimmed, and the surrounding dark forces weakened slightly. Strike at your last breath. Gandalf, Daradist, Elrond, and Glorfindel intensified their attacks, forcing the eye back, even shrinking. Even so, the eye remained defiant. You cannot defeat me, nor stop me. Darkness will return. The eye erupted in a terrifying blaze, unleashing its most powerful blow, forcing the 4 besiegers back. The 5 ring wraiths were instantly drawn into the eye, becoming one with it. The 3 rings, to the elven kings beneath the firmament, the 7 rings, to the dwarven lords in the stone halls, the 9 rings, to the dead among mortals. Dark, ancient words echoed around them, a voice, a chant. Within the eye, 9 human rings and 3 dwarven rings loomed. The 1 ring governs all rings, the 1 ring seeks all rings, the 1 ring leads all rings, and imprisons all rings in darkness. The 1 ring shall be mine. Chapter 87, The Light of Eärendil. Light will drive out darkness, and a new age will usher in Middle-earth, but there is no place for you there, a voice boomed from behind the crowd. Following it was a holy radiance, driving back the forces of darkness. Lady Galadriel, everyone looked on in surprise. Dressed in white, Galadriel sauntered towards them, radiating a moonlight-like glow that burned the surrounding forces of darkness into retreat. The eye's pupils narrowed upon seeing Galadriel, and its hollow, cold voice deepened. You always appear at the wrong time. No, you awaken in the wrong place. Galadriel stepped onto the scorched earth, ignoring the scorching flames, and approached Sorin's eye. Sorin, servant of Dark Morgoth, you have no power here, no support. You have no name, no face, no form. Return to the void, where you rightfully belong. Galadriel held up a crystal jar that resembled a star, releasing a dazzling starlight. It was a crystal vial containing the light of Eärendil, imbued with a powerful divine power that possessed a natural counteracting effect against evil creatures and the forces of darkness. The light of Eärendil, also known as the Star of Eärendil, was the brightest morning star in Middle-earth. Eärendil was Elrond's father. He wore the Silmarils forged by Fëanor and sailed the white ship across the heavens. The light of the Silmarils adorning his HUD became the star of hope for Middle-earth. The Silmarils, forged by Fëanor from the light of the 2 trees, were sacred artifacts coveted by even Morgoth, Sauron's former master. Their possession sparked the war between the elves and Morgoth in the First Age. The crystal vial in Galadriel's hand contained the light of the Silmarils and the 2 trees. As Galadriel channeled her full might, the light of Eärendil within the vial erupted with the greatest divine power. Under the light of Eärendil, Sauron's eye corroded rapidly, like sulfuric acid, and he let out a series of agonized screams. Cracks appeared in the stream of light, and a shriek tore through the sky. You will eventually fall into darkness. The smoke and dust cleared, and the eye shattered, leaving only a dark red star streaking eastward, streaking through the clouds with sulfur and fire. Defeated once again, Sauron fled in panic, powerless. Galadriel, who had summoned the light of Eärendil, stumbled back exhausted, only to be supported by Elrond and Gandalf. She collapsed pale in Gandalf's arms, and the crystal flask in her hand dimmed. Lady Galadriel, are you alright? Gandalf asked with concern. Everyone gathered around, looking at Galadriel with concern. Galadriel shook her head, her gaze toward the far east, filled with worry. Although we've banished him temporarily, Sauron's spirit still lingers, and he could return at any moment. This is already a very good outcome, my lady, Glorfindel consoled. Sauron has suffered heavy losses this time. His form has been destroyed, his powers lost once again, and only a wisp of his soul remains. It will be difficult for him to revive any time soon, and as long as the One Ring remains in this world, Sauron will never be destroyed. Elrond's expression was serious. Sauron has fled to the far east, most likely to his lair in Mordor. We must warn Gondor and warn them to be vigilant against the Mordor region. Gandalf's gaze fell to the castle outside Dol Guldur. The orcs that had gathered scattered into the dense forests following Sauron's defeat. The orcs fled in an orderly manner, retreating northeastward. It's clear someone is manipulating them. His eyes met Dewey's, a look of concern on his face. I'm afraid that after Azog's death, the orcs have quickly emerged with a new leader. This isn't good news for us. Dui didn't seem to care much. He looked at Galadriel, whose face remained as pale as ever, and pulled a potion from his dimensional bag. Lady Galadriel, this is a soothing potion I made. Perhaps it can help you. Galadriel didn't refuse Dui's offer and smiled at him. DUI almost lost himself in that smile, but quickly averted his gaze, silently wishing that she had a husband. Seeing his embarrassment, Galadriel's smile widened. She curiously examined the red potion DUI had given her, then downed it in one gulp. The bitter taste made her frown slightly. But the potion's effects were evident. A blush quickly appeared on her pale face, and she was no longer as frail as before. "Thank you for the potion, DUI, I feel much better." Galadriel's eyes flashed with surprise. She hadn't expected DUI's potion to be so effective. DUI was even more astonished. An ordinary person would only need 3 drops of the palliative to recover. But Galadriel had taken an entire bottle to recover even slightly. The disparity left DUI speechless. Seeing Galadriel's considerable recovery, the others looked at DUI with even greater surprise. Elrond's gaze towards DUI became even more kind. Today's victory over Sauron will be recorded in epic history, and Wizard DUI has played a vital role. If it weren't for your powerful spell that severely damaged Sauron and caused his collapse, we wouldn't have been able to gain the upper hand until Lady Galadriel successfully banished Sauron. The others agreed with Elrond's words, acknowledging DUI's contribution in this battle. It put him squarely on their level. Still, Gandalf spoke with some concern. "Duir, though my worries are unfounded, I urge you not to indulge in the dark arts. There's nothing wrong with pursuing power, but you must not let yourself fall into darkness and become a slave to it." The others remained silent, but their eyes shared the same sentiment. The Avada curse Duir cast was imbued with a strong aura of dark magic, naturally not hidden from the eyes of these powerful men. Duir was surprised and taken aback by this. He had expected these upright men to disapprove of his dark arts, perhaps even strongly oppose them. Instead, they merely warned him against indulging in them. "Thank you for the reminder, Gandalf. I will be careful." Duir nodded earnestly. He knew that dark arts were extremely dangerous. Excessive indulgence could alter one's mind and even warp the soul. The essence of dark arts is to harm, control, or deprive life. Its power is closely linked to negative emotions, such as hatred, greed, and cruelty. Suffering from such extreme emotions for a long time can gradually warp a person's mind. Furthermore, the misuse of dark magic can cause visible damage to the user's body, transforming their appearance beyond recognition. Just like the Death Eaters in the Harry Potter universe, each one possessed a gloomy and twisted appearance, possessing deranged and cruel personalities. Even Voldemort, like him, lost all trace of humanity. The several individuals present were knowledgeable and wise, and they naturally discerned that DUI was not merely being compliant. Thus, their gazes towards DUI became even more admiring and friendly. Over the long years, they had witnessed countless talented individuals go astray in their pursuit of power. They did not wish for those fighting alongside them today to one day fall into darkness, or even to stand against them. Chapter 88 Chasing. As for using dark magic, none of them were the type to cling to black and white concepts. To the astonishment of Dewey and the others, Galadriel handed Dewey a crystal vial containing the light of Eärendil. "Take it, dark magic can corrupt the mind and easily lead one astray. The light of Eärendil will keep you in the light and prevent you from falling into darkness, my lady. This is truly precious." Dewey felt the gift was too heavy, and hesitated to accept it. After all, he had witnessed Galadriel defeat the Dark Lord Sauron with it. Galadriel pressed the crystal vial into Dewey's hands, her smile refusing to refuse. "Consider it a trade for the potion you just gave me, this." "Thank you, my lady." Dewey accepted the crystal vial containing the light of Eärendil and remembered the favor. The group did not linger in Dol Guldur for long. The brown-robed wizard, Daragast, was returning to his cabin in the woods to continue his companionship with his animal and plant companions. Elrond and Glorfindel, at Galadriel's request, planned to spend some time in Lorien to discuss a plan against Sauron. Dewey and Gandalf declined Galadriel's invitation to visit Lorien and instead set out to catch up with Thorin and his companions. This time, Gandalf was not imprisoned by Sauron and Dol Guldur, as he had previously been, and was only rescued by members of the White Council. Therefore, their journey only took a few days. Judging by the speed and distance traveled by the Fellowship, Thorin and his companions might not have yet left Mirkwood. After their departure, Dewey and Gandalf took a ride on Daradest's sleigh, pulled by rabbits. True to his reputation as the god of carts in Middle-earth, Daradest steered the sleigh at lightning speed through the forest, narrowly avoiding trees each time, drawing repeated cries of surprise from Dewey and Gandalf. Finally, He successfully brought Dui and Gandalf back to the old forest road before bidding them farewell and returning. Phew, this is truly thrilling. An old man like me can't handle this. Gandalf patted his chest with a lingering fear, then spoke after catching his breath. Come on, we must hurry. I wonder where Bilbo and the others are. Hopefully we can catch up. Dui thought for a moment. He seemed to recall Thorn and his companions first encountering giant spiders in the dense forest, then running into elves from the woodland kingdom, and being imprisoned in a dungeon by Thranduil. In that case, they probably hadn't gotten very far. Dui pulled out the Stone of Truth. We can use it to see where they are. Gandalf stopped him, shaking his head gravely. The Stone of Truth isn't omnipotent, Dui. This forest has its master. If you use the stone to spy on the forest, the master will see it as a provocation, and it will cause unnecessary trouble. Dui recalled the moment Gandalf had spotted him when he had used the Stone of Truth to check on him. He immediately put the stone away. The elves of Mirkwood, from top to bottom, were not known for their good tempers. If the Elf King noticed, it would be truly troublesome. The two men walked along the old forest path, also known as the Elf Road. The trees along the way seemed sick and lifeless, and the air was stagnant, carrying a stench of decay. Both of them looked solemn. Be careful not to breathe too much air. This place is contaminated by dark magic. Too much will make you dizzy and hallucinate, Gandalf warned, shielding his nose with his sleeve. Then he murmured worriedly, I just hope the dwarves don't breathe too much of this poisonous air and stray from the path. Otherwise, we'll be in trouble. Dui frowned at the scent of the air and waved his wand over his face. A transparent bubble enveloped his head, instantly isolating him from the polluted air outside. Gandalf, do you need it? I'd love to. Gandalf's eyes lit up at the bubble above Dui's head. Dui waved his wand, adding a bubble to his own. This was the bubblehead charm Dewey had learned from the Book of Spells. Originally used to breathe underwater, it was perfect for this purpose. The two of them, carrying two transparent bubbles, continued forward until they reached a broken bridge. Looking at the broken bridge before them, Gandalf felt a sense of foreboding, his face filled with worry. It seems my fears have come true. They can't cross the bridge, so they must have chosen another way to cross the river. He scanned the surroundings and soon spotted a trail not far from the bridge, some vines that could be used to cross the river. The vines showed signs of mud and climbing. While Gandalf searched for any trace of Bilbo and his companions, Dewey went to the river, used transfiguration to conjure several bottles, and carefully filled them with river water. The water was tainted by dark magic, not only causing hallucinations but also causing immediate drowsiness upon contact, making it easy to plunge into the river and drown. The effect was comparable to Dewey's hypnotic potion. Dewey was deeply curious about this river water and planned to take several bottles with him, either for research or to hypnotize his enemies. Dewey, it's time to go. We need to find Bilbo and the others as soon as possible, Gandalf called out. Okay, coming. Dewey put the bottles of river water into his space bag and quickly walked towards Gandalf. Restore as new. Dewey waved his wand at the broken bridge. The broken bridge quickly healed. The two crossed the stone bridge and quickened their pace. However, for the rest of the journey, neither of them saw any signs of recent foot traffic. This meant that after crossing the river, they had not returned to the forest path, but had instead gone elsewhere. Seeing Gandalf's concern, Dewey reassured him, Don't worry, Gandalf. Perhaps they simply strayed from the right path and are now ahead of us, and I have a spell to try to find them. Gandalf's eyes lit up at this, and he looked at Dewey with hope. Do you have any spell, Dewey? Try it. This is my first time trying it, so I can't guarantee it will work right away. Dewey offered no guarantees. Although he had seen the spell in the spellbook, he had never cast it before. He coughed dryly, then waved his wand according to the spell instructions in the spellbook, thinking of Bilbo, enchanted, show me the way. A blue light shot out from the tip of the wand, and the other end disappeared into the unknown depths of the dense forest. Gandalf and Dewey looked at each other in surprise as the light pointed due north. While not completely off the path to the Lonely Mountain, it was still a significant deviation. If the direction was correct, Thorin and his companions were lost. Gandalf sighed deeply. Let's go and see where they've lost themselves. The two of them left the old path and followed the wand's lead into the dense forest. With their wand's guidance, they had a clear goal and hurried towards Bilbo and his companions at top speed. The deeper they went, the denser the forest became. The sky was blanketed in thick foliage, barely allowing a ray of light to filter through. Not to mention the numerous spiderwebs that sealed many areas impenetrable. Huh? Spiderwebs. Dui reacted instantly, his attention on the scene on full alert. Dui, what have you noticed? Gandalf noticed Dui's anomaly. Dui pointed to the dense webs covering the trees. Gandalf, we seem to have reached the lair of giant spiders, the descendants of Ungoliant that Dargist spoke of. Before he could finish his words, a rustling sound filled the air, like the scraping of heavy, sticky legs across the ground or branches. Countless enormous spiders emerged from the trees and the ground, surrounding them from all sides, their densely packed eyes gleaming and gazing at them with a greedy gaze. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 89 Giant Spider. Gandalf's face darkened as he gazed upon the hundreds of giant spiders surrounding him. He immediately drew his smiting sword to meet the enemy. The giant spiders were enormous, the largest nearly the size of a small house, the smallest over 2 meters tall, with a leg span several meters long. They exuded a thick aura of dark magic. Their heads were filled with numerous eyes, densely packed into 2 large clusters, unleashing a dizzying, hallucinogenic power. Mirkwood's current state was in part due to these giant spiders. Descendants of the evil god Ungoliant, these spiders were not only enormous in size, possessed tough skin, and possessed extremely venomous stingers, but their breath was also toxic. The dizzying, hallucinogenic air permeating the forest was contaminated by the giant spiders, killing and withering trees in large numbers. Many forest creatures suffered, forcing them to migrate. For example, the woodland elves who inhabited Mirkwood once roamed throughout the entirety of Mirkwood, but since the invasion of the giant spiders, they have been forced to confine their activities to the area north of the Old Forest Road. But now, the giant spiders had crossed the old path through the dense forest and were advancing closer to the elves' homeland. Dui and Gandalf now had the bubblehead charm to block out the poisonous air outside, rendering the giant spider's most potent weapon ineffective. Still, seeing so many giant spiders surrounding them was a source of concern. More importantly, Gandalf was deeply concerned for Bilbo and his companions' safety. While mute, the giant spiders, like the wargs, possessed intelligence, cunning and cruel, and knew how to cooperate. Perhaps sensing the formidable force of the two, the giant spiders refrained from attacking them. Instead, they spun silk as thick as ropes from a distance, seemingly weaving a web to entrap them and trap them. Armor, Dui immediately cast a magical barrier on himself and Gandalf. The silk was trapped outside the barrier, forming a vast web that covered it. Not satisfied, the giant spiders continued to spin, weaving one enormous web after another, intent on trapping them. Gandalf raised his smiting sword and slashed at the spider silk, only to have it nearly bounce back. The silk was strong and elastic, and the sharp elven sword struck it like a super elastic rope. It took several powerful strikes before he managed to sever a single strand. Dui waved his wand, shatter. To Dui's astonishment, the web actually absorbed some of the spell's power, breaking only a few strands. Seeing this, Dui hesitated to try to break the silk. He wanted to see how far it could withstand. He chose a more powerful spell. Shatter. The web was successfully ripped open. Dui's eyes lit up at the result. This spider silk was truly a treasure. If it could be woven into protective clothing, it would be invulnerable to weapons and possess a certain degree of magic resistance. Perhaps, if the opportunity arose, he could capture a few giant spiders and raise them specifically for silk production. But now was not the time to think about that. Dui held back no longer. Thunderbolt, with a dazzling flash of magic, the massive blast flattened the giant spiders and trees for hundreds of meters, leaving Dui and Gandalf, protected by magic in the center, unharmed. Looking at the devastated wasteland around them, Gandalf couldn't help but sigh. Dui, your magic is truly growing stronger. I'm now confident in our journey to the Lonely Mountain. Dui shook his head. Ever since witnessing the terrifying battle between Gandalf and his companions and Sauron and Dol Guldur, his initial sense of elation had completely subsided. Gandalf's praise was only for show. Don't take it seriously. If you do, you'll lose. He was a Maya, a lesser god. If his powers weren't limited, he wouldn't have been able to destroy Mirkwood, let alone this level of power. In the First Age, the Valar launched the War of Wrath to free the elves from Morgoth's ravages, nearly sinking all of Middle-earth. The war was massive and brutal. The earth cracked, hills collapsed, and plains rose. Middle-earth suffered severe damage, and the northern lands of Beleriand sank completely beneath the sea. Even the Misty Mountains, which Dewey and his companions had so painstakingly crossed, were raised by Morgoth to prevent the Valar from advancing eastward. To prevent further devastation, the Valar established rules that limited the power of all Maiar who entered Middle-earth. This included not only wizards like Gandalf, but also Sauron, whose power was somewhat restricted. He was unable to exert his full power in Middle-earth, forcing him to rely more on violence and military might to conquer the world. Dewey even suspected that Sauron's creation of the One Ring was not only to control the owners of the other rings, but also to break the restrictions imposed by the Valar and gain greater power. After blasting the giant spider away with a thunderbolt curse, Dewey and Gandalf did not stop, but continued to use the guidance charm to guide Bilbo and the others. Gandalf was relieved to find that Bilbo and the others hadn't been captured by the giant spiders, or rather, had managed to escape. Ahead, the two encountered the corpses of several giant spiders. Gandalf pulled an arrow from one and examined it. It's an elven arrow. Bilbo and the others must have encountered elves from the nearby woodland kingdom. Gandalf's expression was far from relaxed. The elves of the woodland kingdom were different from those elsewhere. They were wary, xenophobic, and had tempers that were notoriously bad. More importantly, they had a deep conflict with the dwarves. If the dwarves fell into the hands of the woodland kingdom elves, it would definitely not be good news. Just then, there was a noise. The next second, several figures flashed by, leaping through the woods like deer, appearing on the high ground and trees. Several elves, dressed in robes in natural colors like green, brown, and gray, drew their bows and pointed them at Dewey and Gandalf, their faces stern, as if ready to shoot at any disagreement. "Who are you? Why are you visiting here?" A tall and handsome young elf with braided golden hair draped over his shoulders walked out and looked at the two of them with caution and suspicion. He held a bow and arrow, a quiver on his back, and wore a light brown cloak with an emerald green leaf brooch pinned to the collar of the cloak. Seeing the green leaf brooch on his collar, Dewey immediately guessed his identity. Facing the elf's bows and arrows, as well as the young elf's questioning, Gandalf took the initiative to show his kindness, smiled and saluted. "Greetings, my elf friends from the Woodland Kingdom. I am Gandalf, the gray-robed wizard." As Gandalf introduced himself, Dewey nodded to the young elf. "I am Dwar, the black-robed wizard Dwar." Chapter 90 Thranduil. Wizard. The young elf studied the two, pausing for a few seconds at the bubbles above their heads. Then he spoke something in Elvish to the other elves. The elves instantly lowered their bows and arrows. "I am Legolas, son of Thranduil, Gandalf the Grey. I have heard of you. My father said you were a wise man." Gandalf bowed slightly, the hem of his grey robe brushing the moss at his feet. A warm smile lingered in his voice. "It is an honor to be spoken of so by the King of the Wood." He looked up at Legolas, his gaze clear. "Son of Thranduil, you are as sharp as this forest. It seems the wind of Mirkwood has blew its best talents into you." The young elven prince seemed a little shy at Gandalf's praise. He turned to Dewey, his face filled with curiosity. "Some time ago, we captured orcs who had escaped from the Misty Mountains. They told us that Azog the Blasphemer had been slain by a black wizard. I presume it was you. If there's no other black wizard, then it must be me," Dewey said with a smile. Legolas was now less wary of the two, but he still inquired, "I wonder what brings you to Mirkwood?" Knowing that the elves and dwarves of the Woodland Kingdom were at odds, Gandalf naturally wouldn't mention seeking the dwarves. He coughed and explained, "We were traveling through Mirkwood to Lake Town, but we encountered a giant spider along the way, and that's when you arrived." Legolas nodded. "In that case, please follow me. My father would have liked to see you." Gandalf and Dewey exchanged a glance, but didn't refuse. They were curious, too, about whether Bilbo and his companions had fallen into the hands of the elves. They followed the elves northward. The further north they traveled, the less contaminated Mirkwood became by the dark forces. The forests began to thriving, and the air became fresher. Seeing this, Dewey simply removed the blistering spell from the two men's heads. The elves of the Woodland Kingdom were mostly Sylvan elves, or wood elves, whose hair was primarily black and brown. Sylvan elves, compared to other elven races, were closer to nature, cultivating a connection with the forest's flora and fauna. They were skilled with bows and arrows, using trees, rivers, and other natural environments for concealment and even to sense threats. Surprisingly, while the Woodland Kingdom was primarily populated by Sylvan elves, it was ruled by a minority of Sindarin elves. For example, the Elf King Thranduil and Legolas were both Sindarin elves, their most distinctive feature being their golden hair. The Woodland Kingdom lay northeast of Mirkwood, just a few miles from its edge. The forest river meandered past its southern gate. Unlike the elven architecture of Rivendell, the elves of the Woodland Kingdom lived in magnificent palaces built into underground caverns. The main gate was carved into a hillside covered in maple trees. Its two tall stone doors, engraved with magical elven runes, made it difficult for anyone who entered to leave. Following Legolas through the gate, they entered a winding tunnel, passing through numerous checkpoints and passages until they arrived at a vast hall. At the highest point in the center of the hall sat a throne carved from stone, with massive elk antlers behind it. Atop the throne sat Thranduil, the Elf King of the Woodland Kingdom. He was tall, wearing a crown woven from crimson leaves and berries and rich robes. His handsome face exuded both majesty and a touch of arrogance. "It's been a long time since we last met, Mithrandir," Thranduil said, rising from the throne and stepping down with a polite smile. "Your Majesty," Gandalf said, bowing slightly. Duil followed suit. Thranduil's gaze instantly fell on Duil. "A rare young wizard, I presume you are the black-robed wizard Duir who slew Azog? I've heard legends about you from distant relatives, slayer of wights, killer of ogres, natural enemy of orcs, truly magnificent feats. The rumors are a bit exaggerated, Your Majesty," Duir said, shaking his head. "I can tell whether it's an exaggeration or not," Thranduil waved his hand. "The massive explosion in the forest just now must have been your work. My elves have seen it. Hundreds of meters of forest have been razed to the ground, and at least 100 giant spiders have been killed. Such strength is many times greater than the rumors." He proudly showed off his son to the two men. "Speaking of which, you should already know my son, Legolas. He's the finest marksman in Mirkwood, his arrows never miss the target, and he's slain countless giant spiders." Gandalf, respectfully following suit, praised Legolas for emulating his father's spirit, showering him with compliments. Doi watched Thranduil smile curl upwards, and inwardly, he silently praised Gandalf. Gandalf had truly hit a chord with Thranduil. For Thranduil, praising his beloved son was even more gratifying than praising himself. Legolas, who was also present, blushed at his father's boasting and Gandalf's constant praise. Thranduil, delighted, ordered a banquet to entertain Gandalf and Doyle. At the banquet, Thranduil sat at the head table, Gandalf and Doyle were guests, and Legolas accompanied them. They enjoyed a variety of fine wines and delicacies to the accompaniment of soothing music. During the banquet, Thranduil inquired about the purpose of their visit. "Mithrandir, what brings you through Mirkwood this time?" Gandalf explained vaguely. "We're heading for Lake Town." Lake Town. Thranduil paused, his hand on the wine glass squinting as he looked at Gandalf and Dewey. "What is it about Lake Town that would attract two wizards to visit it? I remember the residents of Lake Town were descendants of the survivors of Dale. When the dragon attacked the Lonely Mountain, Dale at the foot of the mountain was also not spared. Some of the survivors fled to the lake and founded Lake Town. Are you going to Lake Town for the dragon that slumbers in the Lonely Mountain?" Seeing that Thranduil had guessed their purpose, Gandalf nodded, no longer hiding it. "Yes, we're going to the Lonely Mountain to investigate. After all, the dragon could awaken at any moment, posing a huge threat. So, you're working with Thorn Oakenshield? Want to help them retake the Lonely Mountain?" Thranduil frowned, his expression unsure. Seeing Thranduil's attitude turn cold, Gandalf felt somewhat helpless, but he still took the opportunity to ask, "Your Majesty, Thranduil, have you met Thorn and the others?" Thranduil had no intention of concealing anything and said coldly, "They have trespassed into my territory and have been imprisoned in my dungeon. You and Duir are my guests. The Woodland Kingdom welcomes you, but if you wish to plead for the dwarves, please do not ask." Thranduil did not give Gandalf a chance to plead and simply ended his words. Gandalf opened his mouth, but swallowed his words. Thranduil's attitude was clear. As long as he was not pleading for the dwarves, they would remain friends. Chapter 91 Sign in on the Flying Broom. Meanwhile, Dui and Legolas were in a harmonious mood. Unlike Thranduil's arrogance and aloofness, Legolas possessed a gentle disposition. Despite his prejudice against dwarves, he possessed a warm and welcoming air. Legolas, still less than 500 years old, was considered quite young for an elf. He had always lived in Mirkwood, rarely venturing beyond its borders. Legolas expressed admiration for Dewey, the wizard who had slain Azog, and was deeply interested in Dewey and the other's past experiences. As the two were conversing, the system suddenly activated, Hogwarts sign-in system, locating the Woodland Kingdom. Do you want to sign in? Dewey's eyes flickered, and he silently muttered, sign in successful. Congratulations on obtaining the broomstick crafting technique. Then, a flood of knowledge about broomstick crafting flooded into his mind. Dewey was filled with delight. He had actually obtained the broomstick crafting technique. With a broomstick, he could fly anywhere he wanted, making it easy to check in anywhere. It was also safer, as he had an inherent air-to-ground advantage while aloft. After all, in Middle-earth, aside from the likes of dragons and giant eagles, few creatures could fly. Carefully studying the crafting techniques, Dewey discovered that broomstick making shared similarities with wand making. Both used trees with magical properties, but one was used for flight, while the other for spellcasting. Furthermore, the crafting process was significantly more complex and involved more arduous tasks than a wand. Besides selecting materials, carving, grinding, polishing, and adjusting, it also involved some alchemical techniques. Therefore, a successful creation would take at least a week or two at best. Despite this, Dewey still looked forward to owning a broomstick. Coincidentally, he had a large section of the tree core he had previously used to make his wand, which could be used to make a broomstick. So, Dewey decided to spend the next few days before reaching the Lonely Mountain crafting a flying broom as quickly as possible. Then it would be a matter of seeing who could fly faster, the dragon or him. But there was no rush, as he was still at someone else's party. So Dewey suppressed his impatience, gathered his thoughts, and continued to attend the banquet. But before the banquet was over, an elven guard hurriedly approached Thranduil. Your Majesty, the dwarves have escaped. Elven, Gandalf, who also spoke Elvish, heard the news and his eyes lit up. But out of consideration for his host, he suppressed his smile. Thranduil placed his wine glass on the table, frowning as he asked in a deep voice, how did they escape? Someone stole the dungeon key, released the dwarves, and then slipped through the cellar trapdoor, riding empty barrels down the underground river. Thranduil's face darkened, his eyes flickering suspiciously between Gandalf and Dewey. But in the end, he did nothing, snorting coldly and standing up. The feast is over. Make sure to capture those dwarves. This time, I'll keep them captive until they die. The elven guards obeyed, and Legolas, as their leader, joined them. Dewey and Gandalf were the only ones left at the feast, ignored. They stared at each other, unsure whether to leave or stay. Gandalf, however, was shameless and simply took his leave of Thranduil. Since your Majesty Thranduil is busy, we won't disturb you any longer. Thranduil glanced at the two, seemingly debating whether to keep them, but ultimately let them go. Go ahead. Seeing this, Gandalf and Dewey immediately took their leave and left the palace. They reached the banks of the forest river, gazing at the swift current and pondering how to catch up with Thorn and his companions. Gandalf, can you sail? Dewey asked. A little. Gandalf nodded, then shook his head. But I'm afraid the elves won't lend us a boat. Dewey said nothing, but walked directly to a dead log by the river and waved his wand. The dead tree rapidly widened and lengthened, transforming in the blink of an eye into a small wooden canoe capable of holding 2 people. He then tapped 2 branches with his wand, and they transformed into oars. He held one for himself and handed the other to Gandalf. Gandalf took the oars and exclaimed with delight, I had forgotten you had such a power. Your magic is so convenient. He and Dewey pushed the canoe into the water, and the two of them climbed aboard, drifting down the river. The wood elves, observing this from afar, were shocked and quickly reported the incident to Thranduil. Thranduil remained silent, only increasing his respect for Dewey. Dewey and Gandalf, meanwhile, sailed down the river, their boat bobbing against a turbulent current, threatening to capsize at any moment. Thanks to Gandalf's skill, the boat always avoided boulders and swirling currents. But after their boat drifted a distance, they spotted elves battling orcs on the riverbank. Orc corpses occasionally fell into the water, staining it black. What was going on? Dewey's expression grew serious. Hadn't he already slain Azog? How could orcs still be here? Seeing an orc aiming his bow at an elf battling orcs on the other side, Dewey raised his hand and unleashed a spell, Rip to Pieces. The orcs were instantly ripped to pieces by the spell. The elf battling the orcs was Legolas. He decisively dispatched the orc in front of him, nodded to Dewey, and continued to pursue the others. Doubt filled Dewey's heart, but his movements remained unwavering. He drifted down the river, dispatching the orcs on both sides one by one. "Dewey, watch your back," Gandalf warned sharply. Dewey's heart tightened, and he reacted instantly. With a wave of his wand, a wave of water formed a barrier of ice behind him. The next moment, an arrow, tinged with dark magic, struck the ice wall, piercing it halfway. Dewey's pupils shrank. It was a Morgul arrow. He turned and quickly locked onto his attacker, discovering it was an orc on the back of a warg. Shattered to pieces, Dewey retaliated without a word. However, someone else reacted faster. His spell had barely uttered when the orc's head was pierced by another arrow, sending it careening from the warg's back into the river. The warg, struck by Dewey's spell, was instantly torn to pieces. It was Legolas who shot the orc dead. Having accomplished his task, he nodded to Dewey and returned to dealing with the other orcs. Further downstream, Thorin and his companions were also in trouble. They had hidden in a wine barrel and were drifting with the current. On the shore, many orcs were chasing and shooting arrows at them. Chapter 92, Imperious Curse. Dewey and Gandalf sailed down the forest river, reaching its mouth and entering the Long Lake. The Long Lake, formed by the confluence of the Forest River and the Running River, originating from the Lonely Mountain, flows eastward, ultimately emptying into the Round Sea. Lake Town, nestled on an island in the lake center, sheltered by a rocky promontory, was a thriving commercial town. Dewey and Gandalf sailed down the river without encountering Thorin and his companions. "Guide me," a beam from his wand pointed toward the mist-shrouded center of the lake. Gandalf, Bilbo and the others should have found a way across. "That's good news," Gandalf nodded. "I think we can reunite at Lake Town." Just then, a group of orcs began pursuing them from upstream. The river slowed after reaching its mouth, and the two men in the boat instantly became like slow-moving rakes. "Shoot them, Dark Tongue!" With a command from the orc leader, a barrage of arrows descended upon the two. Facing hundreds of arrows, Dewey was unfazed. With a flick of his wand, a protective barrier formed around them. However, while it blocked most of the arrows, a few pierced the barrier, piercing directly through it and heading for Dewey's head. "Beware! There are Morgul arrows hidden in them." Gandalf reacted quickly, severing them with a powerful blow of his sword and shouting a warning. Dewey, too, reacted quickly, immediately using his broad oars as a shield. Instantly, two Morgul arrows pierced the oar planks, their immense force piercing through the wood, revealing their sharp, dangerous black tips. Unexpectedly, the orcs were so cunning this time, hiding their Morgul arrows, imbued with poison and dark magic, amidst a dense forest of arrows, making them impossible to defend against. Dewey's face darkened, and he threw away the oars pierced with Morgul arrows and swiftly returned fire. Thunder! The orcs on the river bank, as if prepared, quickly drew shields from their backs and used them as a shield. Although the immense force of the explosion sent the orcs flying, few actually died. Their shields, made of some inexplicable material, were incredibly strong and successfully withstood the force of the blast. Dewey and Gandalf's expressions grew grave. "Dewey, these orcs are clearly aware of your methods. They're well prepared," Gandalf warned. Dewey nodded silently, also realizing the problem. "Gandalf, let's go ashore first. I need to get some information out of these orcs," Gandalf agreed, quickly navigating the canoe closer. "Shoot. Shoot them," Dark Whisper. The orcs attempted to prevent the two from landing with a barrage of arrows. But in the next moment, their bows and arrows transformed into venomous snakes, baring their fangs and rapidly biting at their necks or arms. The orcs, startled by this sudden change, instinctively dropped their arrows and fell into panic. The snakes landed and transformed back into their original weapons, as if the moment had been an illusion. But before they could retrieve their weapons, Dewey attacked immediately. Shatter, shatter, explode! Dewey leaped from the canoe onto the riverbank, unleashing a barrage of spells. With a roar of devastating shattering, the orcs were instantly killed or wounded. The orc leader, seeing the situation was dire, turned to flee, but was struck by a petrification spell from Dewey, freezing him in place. After dispatching the remaining orcs, Dewey reached the petrified orc leader. With a wave of his hand, he lifted the petrification spell from him. The orc leader quickly drew a dagger and attacked Dewey. With a thud, the orc leader flew backward, slamming heavily onto a boulder behind him. Trying to kill me, Dui sneered, stepping closer to the orcs. Seeing the dagger emanating from dark magic in his hand, Dui raised a brow. Looks like you're well prepared. Besides Morgul's arrows, you also have a dark magic dagger. Are you using it to deal with me? With a flick of his wand, the arm holding the dagger was instantly severed. The orc leader screamed, still glaring at Dui fiercely. Dui's eyes hurt at the orc's hideous, ferocious face. With a flick of his finger, the dark magic dagger floated from the orc's severed hand and quickly pressed against the orc leader's neck. Tell me, after Azog's death, who is your leader? Why are you still hunting the dwarves? Dui threatened. Tell me, and I'll let you go. The orc leader wasn't threatened. Instead, he smiled a hideous, malicious smile and declared triumphantly, Wizard, you never know. Just wait, my master has made all the preparations. Both you and the dwarves will perish in flames. Gandalf approached and heard the orc leader's words. Furious, he slammed the orc against the rock with his staff. Tell me what secrets you know, orc, or I will cleanse you now by the flames of light. The mighty blow pierced the orc leader's heart, but his expression grew even more defiant. Ha, you will learn nothing from me. Our time has returned. The flames of war will engulf the earth, and we will triumph. Gandalf, furious, struck again with his staff. Dewey stopped Gandalf from questioning him. Gandalf, since he won't speak, let's try another tactic. He pointed his wand at the orc leader, concentrating his attention and radiating his utmost malice. So, sensing the strong aura of dark magic emanating from Dewey's spell, Gandalf frowned and looked at him with concern. However, he didn't say much, believing Dewey knew what was going on. So, he focused his attention on the orcs. Dewey had cast the Imperious Curse, one of the 3 unforgivable curses. The Imperious Curse lacked direct lethality, neither the direct killing power of the Killing Curse nor the tormenting power of the Cruciatus Curse. However, its most dangerous aspect lay in its ability to control the thoughts and actions of others, rendering them a puppet of the caster. Even once beloved family members or friends could be murdered without hesitation. The Imperious Curse effectively controlled and influenced a person's soul, transforming them into someone no longer truly themselves. More importantly, there was no antidote. To escape its control, one had to either exert an extremely strong willpower to break through its effects, or kill the caster, effectively neutralizing the curse. Beyond that, it was nearly impossible to break the Imperious Curse with other magical means. Seeing the oak leader's eyes grow empty, Dui immediately asked, "Who is your new leader?" The oak leader struggled for a moment, but regained his composure the next second. "It's Bolg, son of Azog. He's our new king." Chapter 93 Changhu Town. Upon hearing this answer, Gandalf and Dewey exchanged a look of surprise. They hadn't expected that Azog's son, Bolgar, would so quickly conquer the orcs and inherit his throne. After all, the orc throne wasn't inherited by the father, but by strength. Bolgar's ability to succeed Azog in such a short time only proved that he was no less powerful than Azog. Dui continued to ask, "Did Borg send you after us? Is it to avenge Azog?" The orc leader answered every question, partly. Bolg is furious about Azog's death and has placed a bounty on the heads of Thorin Oakenshield and Duil the Black. Gandalf frowned, puzzled, and asked, "Duil killed Azog, so the bounty is understandable. But why is Borg still pursuing Thorin Oakenshield?" The orc leader replied, "Because Borg wants to prevent Thorin Oakenshield from becoming king under the mountain. He wants to take the Lonely Mountain and then penetrate deep into the northern kingdom of Angmar, bypassing the Misty Mountains and marching straight into the west." Gandalf's expression grew even more puzzled. Why does Borg think he can take the Lonely Mountain? Doesn't he know that a dragon occupies the Lonely Mountain, or has he already reached an agreement with a dragon? Gandalf offered a more serious guess. The orc nodded. Yes, the dragon of Lonely Mountain has awakened, and Borg has reached a deal with him. If we kill Thorin Oakenshield and prevent the dwarves from retaking the Lonely Mountain, the dragon will allow us to enter the north and reclaim the kingdom of Angmar. Gandalf was shocked, his expression solemn. No, we must stop Thorin and his men. The dragon has awakened. If Thorin and his men go to Lonely Mountain, they'll be courting death. Dui hadn't expected such an outcome. He clearly remembered that the dragon Smaug hadn't cooperated with the orcs. This time, with Azog's death, such a drastic change had occurred. The orcs and the dragon had actually joined forces beforehand. Seeing Gandalf's eagerness to stop Thorin and his men from reaching Lonely Mountain, Dui was not optimistic. After all, Thorin was a stubborn man. Reclaiming the Lonely Mountain had become his obsession, even his inner demon. Even knowing the dragon of Lonely Mountain had awakened, he would undoubtedly have chosen to continue the adventure without hesitation. Gandalf, there's still some time before Durin's Day, plenty of time. We can discuss this matter when we reunite with Thorn and his men in Lake Town, Dewey said, looking at the orc leader, who is under the Imperious curse. For now, let's deal with this orc problem. The two men continued their questioning, pausing only after they had exhausted the orc leader's knowledge. Well, I have no more questions. Dwar, do you have any further questions? If not, then we must eliminate him and set off for Lake Town immediately, Gandalf asked, drawing his smiting sword. Dewey stopped Gandalf from killing the orc, shook his head, and smiled slyly. Gandalf, don't kill him yet. He still has some use. Gandalf looked at him in confusion. He's now under my Imperious curse and will only obey my orders, Dewey explained with a smile. Let's release him and have him return to the orcs, so he can keep us informed of the orcs. At a crucial moment, we can even catch Borg off guard and stab him. Gandalf's eyes lit up at this, but he remained somewhat concerned. Is it possible he could break free? If Borg discovers him, it might alert him and cause more trouble. Dewey still had some confidence in his magic. The Imperious curse has no remedy. Unless he possesses a strong will to break free, or encounters a powerful magician like Sauron who can forcefully break the Imperious curse, there's no way to break it, and it will be difficult for others to detect him. That's good. Gandalf reassuringly put away his smiting sword. They then released the orc leader and ordered him to return to Borg to lurk and deliver messages. Of course, if they could kill Borg directly, that would be even better. However, the possibility of that was slim, and they didn't hold out much hope. After releasing the orc leader, Dewey and Gandalf continued their canoe journey towards Lake Town. Passing through the mist, they followed a guidance spell and paddled forward. They finally arrived at Lake Town, situated on an island in the center of the lake. Lake Town consisted mostly of water-based buildings, with boats being the primary means of transportation. Most residents made their livings from fishing. Trade with the elves of the Woodland Kingdom was monopolized by the wealthy of Lake Town, led by the mayor. As they reached the harbor customs office, they were stopped. Stop! A middle-aged man in a dirty brown hat emerged from a house, eyeing them with suspicion and wariness. Who are you? Dewey looked at Gandalf. It was his turn to speak. Good evening, we are travelers from the west, intending to rest for a few days, Gandalf said friendly. The man looked them over, still a little skeptical. Travelers from the west? Do you have any documents? Or any goods? Gandalf shrugged and spread his hands. We carry no cargo, no documents, just a small boat. The man looked at their boat and saw nothing. Without cargo, there's no need to declare customs, but there's still a mooring fee. How much? 1 silver coin. Gandalf turned to Dewey, since he was broke after all. Dewey, on the other hand, had plenty of money. He casually pulled 2 silver coins from his purse and tossed them over. The man caught them expertly. Seeing the 2 coins, his eyes lit up, and his attitude became more welcoming. Anything else you two can do for us? Did any strangers arrive in town before us? The man, eager for the money, opened the door without hesitation. Just before you arrived, a group of dwarves arrived. They were taken home by Bard, the town's lord. I wonder if this information would be of any use to you, sir. Dewey and Gandalf exchanged a glance. They had finally found them. Thank you for the information. It's very useful. The man then opened the gates, allowing Dewey and Gandalf to enter the town by water. Meanwhile, at Bard's house, the dwarves were in a state of panic. Keely, the youngest of the dwarves, had been struck in the leg by an orc-drawn Morgul arrow. Although the arrow was immediately removed, the poison and dark magic still seeped into Keely's body, weakening him further. Thanks to the dwarves' formidable constitution, they had been able to withstand the attack. A normal person would have perished long ago. Morgul arrows are so toxic that ordinary medicines are ineffective. Only Toriel, the wood elf who had tracked the dwarves, healed Keely's wound with king leaf, saving his life. Having lost all their weapons to the elves in Mirkwood, the dwarves were discussing how to acquire new weapons and continue their journey to the Lonely Mountain. A sudden knock on the door shattered the lively discussion, sending the others into a state of alert. Who is it? Bard, the host, approached the door and opened it. Dewey and Gandalf stood outside. It seems we've arrived just in time, Gandalf said, smiling. Gandalf, Dewey here. Bilbo's eyes lit up, and he ran over happily, hugging the 2 men's thighs. The dwarves in the house were also very surprised. Chapter 94 The Dragon Slaying Black Arrow. The appearance of Dowie and Gandalf delighted everyone. Even Thorin Oakenshield showed a rare expression of joy. Ever since the two had temporarily left the group, they had endured a torrent of hardships in Mirkwood. First, they were dazed by the forest's poisonous atmosphere, losing their way. Then, they stumbled into a giant spider's lair and were nearly devoured. After finally escaping the spider's clutches, they were captured and imprisoned by the elves. After escaping the elven dungeon, they were pursued by elves and hunted by orcs, a perilous journey. This was a stark contrast to the previous experience with Dowie and Gandalf. Thorin, seemingly forgetting the unpleasantness of their separation, approached the two and solemnly said, "Welcome back, Dowie and Gandalf. With you joining us, I'm sure this journey to the Lonely Mountain will be a success." Gandalf shook his head. "I'm afraid we can't go to the Lonely Mountain, Thorin. The expedition ends here." As soon as he finished speaking, the room fell silent. Thorin's smile froze, quickly turning grim. His sharp eyes fixed on Gandalf. "Gandalf, what are you talking about? What do you mean the quest ends here?" Gandalf glanced around, seeing everyone's surprised expressions, and sighed. "We've just received accurate news from the orcs that the dragon in the Lonely Mountain has awakened and is working with Bolg, son of Azog. If we go to the Lonely Mountain now, we'll be walking into Tiger's mouth, courting death, so our plan to steal the Arkenstone and rally the dwarves is no longer viable. We must rethink our plan and find another way." A deathly silence fell over the house upon hearing this. The dwarves were in deep sorrow. Even the dwarf kingdom of the Lonely Mountain at its peak couldn't withstand an awakened dragon, so how could they, a dozen or so dwarves now? They wouldn't even be enough to stop the dragon's teeth. Thorin was devastated by this, but then a surge of resentment washed over him, and his eyes filled with madness. "No. I can't give up, even if the dragon awakens. What does it matter? I must get the Arkenstone, no matter the cost." Then, as if talking to himself, he said, "We can split into two groups. One group will attract the dragon's attention at the front door, perhaps even lure it out. The other group will enter through the back door and quietly take the Arkenstone." "Are you mad?" Gandalf tried to wake the mad dwarf. "Don't you know the disaster that will come if you anger the dragon? The dragon will burn everyone with its flames. These companions of yours, and the people of Lake Town, will all suffer its vengeance." Thorin's eyes were filled with madness, and his tone was cold. "War always comes at a price." Everyone stared at him in shock. Even the dwarves couldn't believe he would say such a thing. "You are mad." Gandalf was so angry that his heart was pounding. He clenched his staff tightly, as if trying to wake the mad dwarf. Seeing the atmosphere growing tense, Dewey finally spoke. "Well, there's still over a month until Durin's Day. It's still early. Let's calm down and discuss things slowly." Seeing Dewey speak, Balin, the oldest dwarf, echoed, "You're right. There's still plenty of time. We can replan. We can always find a solution." Bard, the host, invited everyone to sit down. Gandalf and Thorin, sulking at each other, sat at the far ends, one smoking a cigarette, the other with his head bowed in silence. Bilbo and the dwarves looked at each other, not daring to speak. Dewey paid no attention to the atmosphere, instead focusing more on Bard. Bard, who, in his original destiny, had slain the dragon Smaug, was a descendant of Jirian, the former Lord of Dale. But now, he was just an ordinary resident of Lake Town, making a living as a ferryman and peddler. When Smaug invaded the Lonely Mountain, Dale, at its foot, was also destroyed. Jirian, Lord of the Valley, once used the massive black arrow to shoot a scale off a dragon's chest. That black arrow, capable of killing dragons, also passed into Bard's hands. Dewey scanned his surroundings and quickly locked onto a black iron arrow hanging on the wall. It was a solid metal arrow over 2 meters long, resembling more of a spear or harpoon. Dewey walked over and examined it. The massive arrow, forged from an unknown metal, looked heavy and gray, yet it was the only known weapon capable of piercing dragon armor. Guessed, Bard noticed Dewey's actions and approached with confusion. "Can you show me this black arrow?" Dewey asked. Bard looked surprised. "You know about this arrow?" Dewey nodded. "I've heard it's a weapon forged by the dwarves to fight dragons. It's said to be able to penetrate a dragon's hard scales, inflicting fatal damage." Bard shook his head and chuckled bitterly. If it could truly penetrate dragon scales, Dale wouldn't have been destroyed by a dragon. "My ancestor once used it to kill a dragon," Yet the dragon remained unscathed, ultimately perishing in its flames, not unscathed, either. Dui remembered that Bard's ancestor had successfully shot off a scale from Smaug's left chest, creating a fatal weakness. This was also the reason Bard was later able to kill the dragon Smaug with his ancestral black arrow. The conversation between the two was overheard by others in the room. Benelin the dwarf exclaimed in surprise, "Are you a descendant of Dirion, Lord of Dale? No wonder you look so familiar to me." "You have some of his features," Bard scoffed. "You have a very sharp eye. After all, I'm only a fisherman now." Thorin, who had been silent for a long time, stood up and stared intently at the black arrow, his expression filled with excitement and greed. "Is this the black arrow that can kill the dragon?" Gandalf, as if guessing his thoughts, poured cold water on him, saying, "It's only a possibility. Thorin Oakenshield, you can't expect to kill a dragon with this black arrow. Dragons are very cunning. They won't just stand there and wait for you to kill them. If you don't have a chance of killing them with one blow, what awaits you is the dragon's mad revenge." Thorin ignored Gandalf's words and stared at the black arrow with a determined look. "No, this is fate's revelation. Fate has sent this black arrow to me, wanting us to use it to accomplish the great feat of slaying the dragon." He turned and looked at Bard. "How much?" "What?" Bard didn't react. "How much is this black arrow?" "I want it." Bard was stunned, then shook his head. "I'm sorry, this is an heirloom from my ancestors and is not for sale." "You will sell it?" Thorin was determined to get it. "You are a descendant of Dirion, and you should know the treasures in the Lonely Mountain. As long as you are willing to hand over this black arrow, I promise to exchange it for 1/14 of the treasures of the Lonely Mountain." Chapter 95 Professor McGonagall's Notes. Bard was tempted by Thorin's offer to trade the black arrow. Legend has it that the treasures within the Lonely Mountain are so plentiful that even dragons are drawn there. If he could obtain a quarter of the treasure, not only would his life be transformed, but he could also help the impoverished residents of Lake Town and perhaps even rebuild Dale to its former glory. But after careful consideration, Bard shook his head. "I can't risk the lives of the people of Lake Town. If the dragon survives, the entire town will suffer its vengeance, and everyone will be consumed by its flames, not to mention now that the dragon has awakened." Thorin's expression darkened at the refusal. His gaze lingered on the black arrow for a moment, then he snorted and turned back to his seat, his face sullen and unsettled. The atmosphere in the room grew colder once more. Gandalf, seeing Thorin like this, looked a little worried. Meanwhile, Dewey was absorbed in the system check-in process, Hogwarts check-in system, locating Lake Town. "Do you wish to check in? Sign in successfully. Congratulations on receiving the Transfiguration Notebook of Minerva McGonagall, Master of Transfiguration." Dewey's eyes lit up as he gazed at the thick notebook before him. Professor McGonagall's notebook? What a surprise. Dewey eagerly flipped through it, quickly captivated by its contents. As a Master of Transfiguration, Professor McGonagall's notebook contained not only detailed records of various transfiguration spells, but also spells for transforming objects into objects, objects into animals, and animals into animals. It also included spells for transforming humans, including animagus. There were even spells and techniques for transforming elements like water, fire, and earth. For example, one could condense flames into giant pythons or dragons, or animate statues to aid in combat. It was truly a comprehensive work on transfiguration. Dewey treasured Professor McGonagall's notebook. Especially since she was an animagus with the form of a tabby cat, Professor McGonagall's notebook meticulously documented the various situations encountered during her animagus spells, along with their corresponding responses. This was a valuable lesson for Dewey, who was currently practicing as an animagus. He held a mandrake leaf under his tongue, waiting for the next full moon to arrive so he could remove it and proceed to the next step. That time was approaching very soon. But before that, Dewey decided to use this opportunity to craft his broomstick. Over the next few days, the conflict between Gandalf and Thorin continued unreconciled. Gandalf tried to persuade Thorin to abandon his quest for the Lonely Mountain. But Thorin was adamant, determined to continue his quest, determined to obtain the Arkenstone, no matter the cost. To this end, he approached the mayor of Lake Town to negotiate a deal, hoping to obtain weapons from the town's armory to arm his dwarves. He was even obsessed with Bard's black arrow, capable of piercing dragon scales, and he used threats and inducements to try to obtain it. The mayor of Lake Town was a greedy and blind man. Upon learning of the treasure hidden in the Lonely Mountain, he immediately agreed to provide the dwarves with weapons, without considering the threat posed by the dragon. In his opinion, it was just an investment in some weapons that had been gathering dust in the armory, and it didn't cost him any money anyway. If it didn't succeed, it would be fine. But if it did, he would gain inexhaustible wealth, a business with no investment, and he would make a fortune. To this end, the mayor held a grand farewell party for the dwarves to bid farewell to the dwarf warriors. Gandalf was worried about this, but he could not stop it. As for Dui, he turned a deaf ear to the outside world and stayed at Bard's house, spending his days sharpening and carving the willow heart with his sharp dagger. Dui, the situation has deviated from my original plan, and I am really worried. One day, Gandalf found Dui and said with a look of concern on his face, "It's not just the dragons that are a problem. There's also Thorin. The dragon disease runs in their family bloodline. The closer they get to the treasures of the Lonely Mountain, the more pronounced his madness becomes. I'm afraid that when Thorin touches those treasures, he'll be stricken by the madness before the dragon's flames can consume him." Facing the worried Gandalf, Dui felt both admiration and helplessness. He admitted he couldn't be as selfless as Gandalf, even repaying evil with kindness. After all, Gandalf had genuinely cared about Thorin and his companions, tirelessly trying to persuade them not to reach the Lonely Mountain and alert the awakened dragon. But to the stubborn Thorin, Gandalf's persuasion was ill-intentioned, even an enemy hindering his efforts to reclaim his homeland. So, he simply ignored Gandalf and chose to work with the mayor. If Dui were Gandalf, he wouldn't bother trying to persuade such a person, simply letting him destroy himself. If all else fails, Gandalf, why don't you just knock him out and release him after Durin's Day, Dewey suggested. Or if you don't want to, I can help. A single spell will quiet him. Gandalf was tempted by Dewey's words, but immediately shook his head. As much as I'd like to, this is Thorin's will. We can only guide and persuade him, not force him to change his will. Doing so will only lead to even more disastrous consequences. His eyes fell on the object in Dewey's hands, and he asked curiously, "Are you making a broom?" Dewey nodded, then shook his head. "I'm going to make a flying broom, as a means of transportation." "A flying broom? You mean one that flies?" Gandalf's eyes suddenly lit up, and he asked quickly. Dewey nodded, his hands still moving. Gandalf instantly cast aside Thorin's thoughts, his attention focused entirely on the broom that was gradually taking shape before him. Flying, it was a temptation no one could resist, not even Gandalf. While Gandalf was close friends with the great eagles and could summon them to fly him when he needed, being carried aloft was a completely different experience than flying on his own. So, Gandalf was intrigued by the broomstick Dewey had mentioned. However, before Dewey could finish crafting the broomstick, Bard hurried back from outside with a surprising message. "The dwarves have just left on their ship, and they're on their way to the Lonely Mountain, and they've taken the halfling with them." "They left?" Gandalf's composure was immediately flaring, his temper flaring. "They left without even telling us. What does Thorin Oakenshield mean? Does he not trust us?" Gandalf's eyes shone with anger and a hint of disappointment. "No, we can't just let them into the Lonely Mountain. Thorin Oakenshield is taking them to their deaths." He grabbed his staff and set out to catch up with Thorin and the others. But this time, Dewey refused to accompany Gandalf. He shook his head and pointed at the broom in his hand. "My flying broom will be finished in a few days, so I'm tied up for the time being. If you're willing to wait a while, Gandalf, you can ride on my broom with me to catch up." Although Gandalf was tempted, he refused. "Never mind. I can't sit still here. I'll go after them first. You can come back after the broom is finished." Then he borrowed a boat from Bard and sailed off in pursuit of Thorin and the others. Dewey was the only guest left at Bard's house. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 96: Flying on a Broomstick. Dewey got along well with Bard's family. Bard was warm and hospitable, and his two children were innocent and kind. Dewey was also generous, giving them some beautiful jewelry from his dimensional bag. 3 days had passed since Thorin and his companions, along with Gandalf, left. Dewey was delighted to receive his first broomstick. The handle, crafted from the hardest core of an old willow tree, was a jade white hue, its lines smooth and flowing. Intricate runes were engraved within, a faint whiff of magic flowing through it. The broom's tail was cut from leftover material into countless neatly sliced twigs, ensuring its streamlined shape and precise balance. Once the broomstick was finished, Dewey was eager to use it. He placed it at his feet, held out his hand, and shouted, "Get up!" The broom rolled on the ground. "Get up!" This time, the tone was firm, unyielding. With a whoosh, the broom leaped from the ground and landed squarely in Dewey's hands. Grasping the broom, Dewey's face curled up in a radiant smile of excitement and accomplishment. Having completed his broom, the first thing he needed to do was test its performance. Dewey eagerly arrived outside Bud's house, straddled the broom, and with a gentle push of his feet, he was instantly lifted up by the broom, slowly floating off the ground. Beneath his butt, an invisible air cushion supported him, making him feel like riding a bicycle. No need to worry about bumps. Bud's family, who had followed him out, were stunned by the sight. Bud's youngest son, after a moment of shock, was filled with excitement and eager to try it out himself. Dewey, overwhelmed by his first flight, leaned forward, shooting off like a rocket. Dewey flew like a headless fly, soaring through the air, sometimes soaring into the sky, sometimes nearly hitting the roof, a terrifying sight. The residents of Lake Town were captivated by the scene and immediately stunned. They recognized the figure on the broom as a guest staying at Bard's residence. They hadn't expected such a feat, the ability to fly. The mayor, who had nearly been hid on his own roof, stared out the window with wide eyes, his eyes filled with regret. Though greedy and short-sighted, he still possessed a certain level of common sense. He regretted not inviting such an extraordinary figure, instead giving Bard, the fisherman, a chance. Dewey, oblivious to the Lake Town residents' reactions, finally, after a brief familiarization with his broom, steadied himself somewhat, landing it back in front of Bard's house. Looking at Bard's children, who looked envious and eager, Dewey smiled and promised them he would take them flying someday. After a formal farewell to Bard, Dewey soared into the sky on his broom, heading towards the lonely mountain. As for Bard's black arrow, Dewey considered taking it with him to use against the dragon Smog, but after some thought, he decided against it. While the black arrow is the only weapon known in Middle-earth capable of breaking dragon scales, it doesn't mean it's the only weapon capable of defeating dragons. Dewey wields the divine spear, Egress, whose piercing power is unmatched. Gil-galad, High King of the Noldor, once used it to pierce Sauron's strongest armor, leaving him wounded. Dewey believes his divine spear is no less powerful than the black arrow. Therefore, the black arrow remains with Bard, to see if he can still accomplish the feat of slaying a dragon. The speed of a broomstick depends on the craftsmanship. Wizards in the magical world, for example, have brooms such as the Sweeper, Comet, and Nimbus series, as well as the fastest, the Firebolt. Although Dewey has mastered the craftsmanship, he's only a novice, so the speed of his broomstick can't even match the slowest of the magical world's broomsticks. Even so, with his broomstick, he managed to catch up with Thorin, Gandalf, and the others, who had already set out for 3 days, in just half a day. It's unknown what happened during those 3 days, but Gandalf failed to persuade Thorin to abandon his quest for the Lonely Mountain. Instead, he continued on with them. When Dewey was still just a tiny speck in the distance, Gandalf spotted him, and a smile immediately spread across his face. Aha! The last of our men has finally caught up. Upon hearing Gandalf's words, everyone looked in the direction he was looking. Then, in the distant sky, a blurry figure rapidly approached them. Soon, Dewey's form came into view. Dewey, everyone stared at the incoming Dewey in disbelief. Oh my god! Am I still asleep? Why am I seeing Dewey flying on a broom? Bombur the dwarf rubbed his eyes and exclaimed. Everyone, am I not too late? Dewey leaned forward slightly, slowly descending from mid-air, landing on the ground and smiling. Welcome back, Da'il. Gandalf happily stepped forward and gave Da'il a hug, then eagerly glanced at the broom in his hand. I didn't expect you to make a flying broom so quickly. How does it feel to fly? Seeing Gandalf's eagerness to try it out, Da'il jokingly handed him the broom. It feels pretty good. You can try it too. Gandalf's eyes lit up, and he took the broom with a beaming smile. Then I'll be happy. After tossing the broom to Gandalf to toss, Da'il turned and greeted the others. Bilbo felt reassured by Da'il, yet he felt a sense of guilt, afraid to meet his gaze. As an honest and trustworthy hobbit, Bilbo didn't know how to refuse. After Thorin threatened him with the contract they had signed, Bilbo agreed to take the risk and steal the Arkenstone for Thorin, even though he knew the dragon had awakened. He followed the dwarves out of Lake Town. More importantly, Bilbo had faith in the ring. He felt that once he wore the ring, he could steal the Arkenstone from under the dragon's nose. This would be a fulfillment of the pact they had signed. However, his departure from Lake Town with the dwarves had been so sudden, he hadn't had time to tell Dewey and Gandalf before leaving. Seeing Dewey again now, he felt a little guilty. Dewey didn't mind. Bilbo was his friend, not his owner. He didn't need to ask for his opinion on anything. He patted the hobbit's shoulder and greeted the dwarves with a smile. Honestly, after spending so much time together, he had a good impression of the dwarves, with the exception of Thorin. Balin, the eldest, was the wisest and most mature of the group, the brains of the group. Fili and Kili, the youngest, were Thorin's nephews, but they were lively, clever, and friendly. Bumber, the fattest, was easygoing, fond of eating and sleeping, and the laughing man of the group. The other dwarves had their own strengths, too. But when it came to Thorin, Dewey didn't know how to evaluate them. "Welcome back, dwarf," Thorin said cautiously, his eyes full of suspicion. "I hope you are here to help me retake the Lonely Mountain, rather than trying to persuade me to give up like Gandalf did." Chapter 97 River Valley City. Dewey remained impassive in the face of Thorin's questioning. "Since I promised to help you reclaim the Lonely Mountain, I won't break my word." As for whether the other party lived or died, he had no business caring. He had only agreed to help him reclaim the mountain, and hadn't agreed to anything else. Thorin, oblivious to the deeper meaning behind Dewey's words, smiled. "I'm glad to hear your answer. Don't worry, when I reclaim the mountain, you will not only receive 1/10 of the treasure as per the contract, but also the friendship of our entire clan, the Lins." Just then, a cry of surprise rang out. Gandalf soared into the sky on his broomstick with a whoosh, soaring through the air with remarkable agility and ease. With his nimble turns and breathtaking dives, Gandalf seemed to be glued to his broomstick. His skill and speed rivaled that of the finest Quidditch players, not at all like a septuagenarian. Watching this scene, Dewey felt nearly convulsed with envy. How could the gap between people be so vast? He hadn't even explained how to ride a broomstick to Gandalf, he'd already figured it out. And even better than him, Gandalf, like a mischievous child who'd found a toy he'd always wanted, rode it for a spin before finally landing, still unsatisfied. "Haha, this broomstick is so useful. With it, I could go anywhere in Middle-earth." Seeing Gandalf's delight, Dewey smiled and said, "If you like, I'll make you one when we're done with our trip to the Lonely Mountain." Gandalf's eyes lit up, and he wasn't about to be polite. "Don't worry, Dewey, I'll make you a mighty staff, and then I'll teach you one of my little tricks." He winked as he mentioned the trick. Dewey was intrigued by what Gandalf was talking about. After all, as a Maya, anything he called a unique skill couldn't be ordinary. It was a shame that Gandalf was deliberately teasing Dewey and not revealing it just yet. Seeing Bilbo and the dwarves envious of the flying brooms, Dewey offered them a try. Apparently, the dwarves and hobbits lacked magical powers and were unable to control them, forcing them to give up the idea of flying. While they couldn't ride, they could be carried. Gandalf, eager to be their rider, took them all to Dale and let them experience flying. To the dwarves' exclamations, Kili, Fili, Balin, and others boarded Gandalf's flying cars and headed for Dale. Dewey also had a ride with Gandalf, but he never wanted to try it again. The old man drove at a speed even faster than the young man, pushing the limits the entire time. The entire time, Dewey worried that his painstakingly crafted broom would disintegrate and become scrapped. But it wasn't until Gandalf brought back the last and fattest bomber, wobbling back, with the broomstick still intact, that Dewey breathed a sigh of relief. Thanks to the broomstick, they arrived at Dale earlier than expected. Dale was located at the foot of the Lonely Mountain, and they were not far from their destination, Hogwarts check-in system. Locating Dale, "Do you want to check in?" As Dewey landed, the system immediately responded. A thought struck Dewey, and he silently said, check-in successful. "Congratulations on receiving the Wizard's Oath." Seeing the title, Dewey flipped through it curiously. It turned out to be a book about magical contracts, documenting various spells, including the Unbreakable Vow Curse, the Fidelius Curse, and the Blood Pact. The Unbreakable Vow Curse was an extremely strict magical contract, requiring the sworn party to uphold their promise. Violating it would result in a magical backlash and death. The Fidelius Charm, A spell used to maintain secrecy, requires a secret keeper to forever conceal the secret within their soul. Unless the secret keeper reveals it, no one else can discover the secret, not even Veritaserum or Legilimency. Blood pacts are more interesting. Those who make a blood pact forbid harming each other. Dumbledore and Grindelwald had previously made one. Furthermore, a blood pact allows for the sharing of souls and magical powers, a magical pact of shared life and death. DUI was delighted to receive the pact magic. While non-offensive, pact magic is incredibly useful and powerful in certain areas. He even felt the urge to force Thorin to sign a new pact, so that when his dragon sickness returned, he wouldn't dare break it. But on second thought, he decided against it. There was no need for such a hassle. If Thorin dared to break the pact and withhold his agreed share of the treasure, he would realize the irrationality of offending a wizard. After signing and obtaining the contract magic, DUI expanded his magical knowledge and began to study its contents with great interest. Upon arriving in Dale, the group didn't rush to the Lonely Mountain immediately. Instead, they settled into a house that DUI had magically restored. Durin's Day was still some time away. According to the information on the map Elrond had analyzed, they only needed to reach the Lonely Mountain's back gate on Durin's Day. When the last rays of light of the day shone on the keyhole, they would be able to open the back gate and enter the Lonely Mountain. They stopped in Dale to discuss their plans and preparations for entering the Lonely Mountain. Seeing that Thorin remained adamant about reaching the Lonely Mountain and that the other dwarves would not disobey his orders, Gandalf offered guidance and improved the dwarves' rough plan to prevent Thorin and his group from thwarting the dragon Smaug. Their sole mission was to steal the Arkenstone without the dragon's detection and to avoid a direct confrontation with Smaug. With the Arkenstone, Thorin would officially become king under the mountain, rallying the 7 clans of dwarves to unite their forces against the dragon and reclaim the Lonely Mountain. However, the dragon was sensitive to the scent of dwarves and humans, and would be detected if they approached. Therefore, Bilbo, a hobbit with stealth skills and the ability to remain unnoticed by the dragon, became the only option. Bilbo could steal the Arkenstone from the dragon, thus avoiding the dragon's threat. However, Gandalf firmly opposed this plan. The dragon had already awakened, and even Bilbo, with his hobbit-like stealth skills, would have found it difficult to avoid detection. Asking Bilbo to steal the Arkenstone from the dragon was tantamount to sending him to his death. Ultimately, Bilbo's willingness to take the initiative silenced Gandalf. Chapter 98 Animagus. Bilbo, are you sure you want to do this, Dewey, not expecting Bilbo to step forward, warned him earnestly. The dragon has awakened, and might be waiting for us to fall into its trap. It would be dangerous if you went, perhaps even dead. Facing Gandalf and Dewey's expressions of concern and disapproval, Bilbo smiled brightly. After all, isn't that what I came here for? My luck has always been good. Maybe I'll find the Arkenstone right away and won't encounter the dragon at all. Gandalf was filled with worry at Bilbo's words, which seemed to comfort him and himself. He even felt a sense of regret for getting this innocent hobbit into this trouble. Dewey, on the other hand, watched Bilbo's hand unconsciously reach into his pocket, a look of deep thought on his face. Although Bilbo's words were soothing, wasn't he also confident in himself, or perhaps in the one ring in his pocket? Since Bilbo, the real owner, had agreed, Dewey and Gandalf naturally had no reason to object on his behalf. However, before Durin's Day arrived, the full moon arrived. Dewey removed the mandrake leaf he had held under his tongue for a full month and placed it in a crystal vial filled with his own saliva. Then, into the moonlit vial, he added a strand of his own hair and a silver teaspoon of dew. Dewey had previously collected the dew during his travels through Mirkwood. Dew must be collected from a place where there had been no sunlight or human contact for 7 days, and Mirkwood is often dark and inaccessible. Finally, Dewey added a chrysalis of a hawk moth. With all this done, he only needed to place the mixture in a quiet, dark, and undisturbed place until the next thunderstorm. Then, he could dig it out and drink it in one gulp, completing the animagus transformation. However, thunderstorms were unpredictable, so waiting for one could take weeks, months, or even years. This was why the animagus transformation was so difficult, as success depended entirely on luck. However, this step presented no problem for Dewey. If the mountain is not my mountain, then I am the mountain. Since the arrival of a storm was unpredictable, he would find a place with frequent storms and bury the crystal vial there, eliminating the need to wait for a storm to arrive. And Dewey knew just such a place. So, Dewey bid farewell to everyone overnight, repaired a fireplace in Dale with a repair spell, connected it to the fireplace in Rivendell via the Floo network, sprinkled a handful of Floo powder, and teleported to Rivendell. In Rivendell, Elrond had not yet returned. Dewey exchanged a brief greeting with the elven twins, Elrahir and Eladin, then flew on his broomstick towards the Misty Mountains. His destination was the high pass of the Misty Mountains. The region was prone to frequent thunderstorms, making it the perfect place to bury the crystal vial. Dewey rode his broomstick smoothly to the high pass. The rock giants who had once played there were gone, leaving only the ruins of the area, ravaged by the boulders. Dewey found a quiet, dark spot on the canyon where he wouldn't be disturbed, and buried the crystal vial deep in the earth. He also cast magical protection around it, just in case. With all that done, all he had to do now was wait for the thunderstorm to arrive. Dewey looked up at the dark, overcast sky, filled with anticipation. Given the weather conditions here year-round, it wouldn't be long before a thunderstorm arrived. Dewey then left, returning to Rivendell and returning to Dale through the fireplace. "Is everything going well, Dewey?" Gandalf asked as Dewey emerged from the fireplace. Dewey smiled cheerfully and nodded, "Very well. Now we just have to wait for the next thunderstorm, that'll be soon." "I remember there were many thunderstorms in the Misty Mountains," Gandalf said with a grin. "I think I'll be seeing your animagus soon. I'm so excited, I'm curious what animal you'll transform into." Besides the skin changers, this is the first time I've seen magic that allows transformation into an animal. Dewey was also curious about what kind of animal his animagus would be. While the form of an animagus is generally the same as its patronus, this isn't always the case. Some people's patronuses can change with drastic changes in their temperament. For example, Severus Snape's patronus became a doe after Lily Evans' death. So, while a patronus can be a reference, it doesn't necessarily have to be the same animal. Of course, if his animagus were an owl, that would also be great. Not only could it fly, but it also had night vision, making it perfect for concealment or stealth. The only downside is that animagus transformations are usually limited to non-magical creatures. If they were to transform into magical creatures, there would be unpredictable consequences. Otherwise, if one had an animagus like a phoenix, dragon, or thunderbird, they could definitely push their animagus to its limits. Thinking of this, Dewey couldn't help but think of Beorn, who could transform into a giant bear. Beorn's bear form was no ordinary bear. Not only was he enormous, powerful, and possessed exceptional defense, he was worthy of being called the Earth Bear. According to Gandalf, the Skin Changers, to whom Beorn belonged, were originally mere humans who lived in the Misty Mountains. They gained the ability to transform into giant bears after receiving a gift from the spirits of nature. Dewey was intrigued. If he had the chance, he wanted to study the secrets and see if he could apply them to his animagus. If he could upgrade his animagus into a magical creature, that would be a real jackpot. However, there was no rush, he hadn't even completed his animagus yet, so he put the idea aside for the time being. As Durin's Day approached, the group set out once more. This time, Dewey acted as driver, taking them around the Lonely Mountain. However, he lacked Gandalf's patience and had to haul people back and forth one by one. So he cast a levitation spell on everyone, then tied them up with a long rope, the other end of which was tied to a broom. Then, amidst a burst of crazy screams, Dewey led a group of floating people towards the Lonely Mountain like flying kites. Gandalf, who was sitting behind Dewey, watched the scene and laughed happily, even annoyed that he had not thought of this trick before. On the back of the Lonely Mountain, starting from the foot of the mountain, there was a zigzag staircase that had been carved out and extended all the way to the mountainside. Dewey rode his flying broom directly to the end of the staircase. Here was a flat stone platform, and there was no way to go up. Chapter 99, Alato opens. "That must be it," Gandalf said confidently, looking at the stone platform. Dewey nodded, lowered his broom, and landed on the stone platform. Once they were on the ground, Dewey untied the ropes and spells from the dwarves. Their beards and hair were tangled, blown into various styles by the wind. Thorin, disheveled, looked grim, vowing to walk even if it meant more trouble than to ride Dewey's broom again. Bilbo, though a bit disheveled, was brimming with excitement, a true testament to the adventurous blood of the Took family. He was completely fired up. When the thrush strikes, stand by the grey rock, the sun setting, and the last rays of Durin's Day will strike the keyhole. Thorin pulled out a map of the Lonely Mountain and, following Elrond's translation, began searching for reference points. The Grey Rock? That's what you're talking about. Thorin immediately spotted a large grey rock at the edge of the mountain. His eyes lit up, and he quickly approached it. Standing next to the rock, you should be able to see the back door, but where is the door? Where is the keyhole? Thorin stood next to the rock as indicated on the map, but after carefully searching the surrounding stone walls, he found no signs of a door or keyhole. The other dwarves also continued to search, trying to find a clue. Thorin, who had found nothing, became more and more anxious, and even suspected that Elrond had lied. "Calm down, Thorin," Gandalf said. "The closer we get to the last moment, the calmer we must be. Don't ignore the details. The map says that the last rays of light from the setting sun will shine on the keyhole, so we just have to wait. After all, it's still a long time before the sun sets." After hearing Gandalf's words, Thorin calmed down a little, but his expression was still not good. "Then I will wait. But if it remains undiscovered, I swear I will make the elves of Rivendell pay for his lies." Gandalf frowned and spoke for Elrond. "Elrond's credibility is unquestionable. He has no need to lie about this matter. Thorin, you cannot doubt him because of prejudice." "I hope so," Thorin replied coldly. Gandalf shook his head and walked over to Dewey. He sighed and whispered, "The closer we get to the Lonely Mountain, the less calm Thorin seems. We must prepare for the worst. The madness inherited from the royal bloodline of Dewey is uncontrollable. If it breaks out, it will not only kill him but also implicate others." Gandalf's tone was heavy, his expression filled with worry. Dewey, however, was not as worried as Gandalf. He shook his head and said soothingly, "There will always be a solution when the time comes. Gandalf, don't worry too much." "I hope so," Gandalf sighed. Seeing Gandalf still worried, Dewey changed the subject. "But if you want to find the back door to the Lonely Mountain, I do have a way. Perhaps we don't have to wait until sunset." Gandalf was surprised by Dewey's words. "Do you have some magic that can find hidden secret doors?" Dewey shook his head and took out the Stone of Truth. Besides being able to see distant sights, the Stone of Truth can also see events in the past. Perhaps it can be used to find the location of the back door to the Lonely Mountain. Dewey's voice remained undimmed, and the others heard him, their gazes turning to him. Thorin even walked over, his eyes fixed on the stone in Dewey's hand. "Dewey, try it." Had he not known it belonged to Dewey, Thorin would have seemed eager to snatch it and use it for himself. Dewey frowned and glanced at Thorin coldly. Could the dragon sickness have affected him so deeply? Thorin seemed a completely different person now. He had become impatient. While not quite crazy, he was also far from calm. Gandalf, somewhat worried, warned, "The dragon is in the mountains now. Be careful not to look at it when using the Palantir. Otherwise, it will easily notice you, alerting the dragon and causing trouble." Dewey, aware of the seriousness of the situation, naturally avoided the dragon's location when investigating. The extent to which the Palantir can see back in time is determined by the user's will. With Dewey's current abilities, looking back to the First and Second Ages, or even the Age of the Two Trees, was unrealistic. However, looking back hundreds of years was no problem. An image quickly appeared within the Palantir. A burly dwarf wearing an iron crown appeared where Dewey and the others were. He walked to the grey rock, waiting for the fading light of the setting sun and the rising moon to converge, eventually converging on a single point on the stone wall. The dwarf, wearing the iron crown, approached the stone wall, inserted a golden key into the small hole at the point of light, and with a gentle twist, a stone door suddenly appeared. The stone door opened, and a dwarf wearing an iron crown stepped in. "That's my grandfather." Thorin looked at the dwarf revealed within the crystal ball, his expression agitated and complex. Then, following the image displayed on the crystal ball, he quickly located the secret door and the keyhole. "Where's the keyhole? It's clearly right here. Why isn't there a keyhole?" Thorin searched and groped for the keyhole, but there was only bare stone, no hole to insert a key. Gandalf stepped forward and gently tapped the stone wall with his staff. He explained to the anxious Thorin and the others, "I think the keyhole is hidden. It requires a specific time and conditions to reveal itself, such as when the last rays of the setting sun of Durnsday intersect with the moonlight, so we still have to wait until sunset." The others suddenly realized. Thorin, though anxious, listened to Gandalf's explanation and could only wait for sunset. Dewey was intrigued by the hidden keyhole. While the dwarves lacked magic, They could imbue their forged objects with extraordinary properties through their exceptional forging skills. He wanted to see if his magic could work on it. "Let me try," Dui said. Having determined the keyhole's location, Dui raised his wand and directed it, chanting, "Aho! Open!" A spell shot into the keyhole's location. A second later, a faint sound of turning gears echoed, and the mountain shook slightly. Amidst the dwarves' astonishment, a rectangular stone door emerged from the wall and opened automatically. "Well, it seems we don't need to wait until sunset," Dui said with a smile. Clearly, the dwarven craftsman who had built the secret door had considered every possible scenario, setting specific times, conditions, and the key required for successful opening. But they had never anticipated Dui's magic's illogicality, bypassing all of this and allowing the door to open. Chapter 100 Entering Lonely Mountain. Seeing the secret door effortlessly opened by a single spell from Dew, Thorin was unsure whether to celebrate its opening or worry about his own back door remaining unused. However, now that the main door was open, the group didn't hesitate, instead entering the hidden passage behind it. Durin's dwarves had hollowed out the entire Lonely Mountain, and the dragon's abode was located in the hall near the front door, so the group didn't need to worry about being discovered by the dragon. As their former home, Thorin and the older dwarves, like Balin, were familiar with the Lonely Mountain's interior and easily led the group to a hidden chamber. Along the way, they could see the skeletons of numerous dwarves, those who hadn't escaped when the dragon took over the mountain. Once inside, the group stopped advancing. The dragon, Smaug, was well acquainted with the sense of dwarves and humans, and any closer approach would easily be detected by the dragon. Everyone's eyes fell on Bilbo. To minimize alerting the dragon Smaug, they had to rely on Mr. Snitch to steal the Arkenstone. That way, they wouldn't have to face the dragon directly. Once they had the Arkenstone, they could return to the Lonely Mountain the same way they came. Thorin, in the name of the king under the mountain, could rally the 7 clans of dwarves to attack the Lonely Mountain. Thorin walked up to Bilbo and patted his shoulder. "It's up to you now. I believe you can get the Arkenstone, right?" Bilbo felt a little uncomfortable under Thorin's gaze, and tilted his head uncomfortably. I'll try." His tone was a little unsure. After all, he was about to face a dragon. Then he felt the pressure on his shoulders grow heavier. "Not try, but I must. I must get the Arkenstone." Thorin's voice was filled with madness and determination. "Enough." Dewey waved Thorin away from Bilbo. Then he stood beside Bilbo, glaring at Thorin with an icy gaze. "Thorin Oakenshield, Bilbo is not your subordinate or servant. You'd better show him some respect." Gandalf also frowned, looking at him disappointedly. "Thorin, wake up. Don't let madness consume your reason. Look at yourself, you are becoming less and less the same Thorin Oakenshield as before. Perhaps it was a wrong decision to send you to the Lonely Mountain in the first place. The closer you get to the Lonely Mountain, the more the dragon disease hidden in your blood becomes apparent, and it is trying to make you self-destruct." "No, I have never been so clear-headed." Thorin glared at Gandalf angrily. "Nothing is more important than the Arkenstone. As long as I have the Arkenstone, I can take back my Lonely Mountain and my treasure. Compared to this, everything else is just a passing cloud. These are never the most important things to you, Thorin Oakenshield. Look around you. Your companions and your people are your treasure. Don't let desire blind you." Gandalf tried to awaken Thorin's conscience. Thorin glanced at the dwarves, who were watching him with concern. His eyes wavered for a moment, but were quickly overcome by a frantic obsession, turning paranoid and frantic. He shook his head, his tone cold. "No, they are of no importance. You are mad." Gandalf's voice was weary. "Come, Gandalf, he has lost much of his sanity." "You can't convince him," Dewey said. "The closer he gets to the treasure of the Lonely Mountain, the more pronounced the dragon sickness in him becomes. If all else fails, just knock him out and take him far away. Perhaps without the influence of the treasure, he'll regain his composure." "Stop arguing. I'm going to steal the Arkenstone." Bilbo's voice suddenly rang out. Seeing everyone's gaze fixed on him, he said, "If we get the Arkenstone, everything will be solved, right?" With the Arkenstone, Thorin can rally the dwarves, and the mission of Dewey, Gandalf, and me will be complete. I can go home." Everyone fell silent. "So, trust me for once, okay?" Bilbo asked with a flawless smile. Dewey, watching Bilbo like this, was moved. He took a deep breath, crouched down to his level, and asked again seriously, "Bilbo, are you sure?" Bilbo nodded firmly. Since you're going, I'll give you some protection. Dui stopped trying to persuade him, waving his wand over him, muttering something. Super armor, comprehensive protection, impenetrable, invulnerable to water and fire, silent and undetectable. Bilbo stared at the multiple layers of protection he had applied to his body, feeling a sense of invisible bloat. Then Dui pulled a pot of mandrake from his space bag and thrust it directly into his hand. Take this mandrake with you. If you encounter a dragon, throw it at it. It'll be enough to delay it for a while. Don't worry, I've cast a spell on you, so you won't hear it when it cries, and if you're really in danger, just strike this gold coin. I'll know immediately, and we'll come to your rescue. Bilbo's smile widened as Dewey continued to exhort him, and he hugged Dewey, moved. I understand, Dewey, thank you. Dewey patted him gently on the back. Be careful not to put yourself in danger, and don't force the gem if you can't get it, okay? Bilbo nodded quickly. Dewey let him go. Gandalf enjoyed this scene, and he patted Bilbo's shoulder with a smile. Dewey has done all he could. I can only wish you good luck. Bilbo, may the Valar bless you. The others didn't notice the last part, but Dewey felt a clear sense of blessing descending upon Bilbo. Bilbo then left the Chamber of Secrets, with everyone's blessings, and headed for the Dragon's Vault. Before leaving, Dewey cast another disillusionment charm on Bilbo. While it couldn't guarantee he'd be hidden from the dragon's sight, it was an extra layer of security. After Bilbo left, the dwarves fidgeted in the silence. Thorin, losing patience as time ticked by, looked at Dewey. Dewey, doesn't your palantir allow you to see faraway places? Can you take it out and see how Bilbo is doing? Or has he gone into hiding out of fear? Or else, why don't you check the Arkenstone's location and we'll find a way to get it? Dewey gave him a cold look. Didn't you hear Gandalf? Using the palantir will only lead to the dragon's discovery. You're courting death, don't take us with you, and Bilbo is a brave hobbit. He's risking his life searching for the Arkenstone for you. If you're ungrateful, that's fine, but if you continue to slander and doubt him, go find it yourself. He held no regard for Thorin, now fixated on the Arkenstone. Dragon sickness, to put it bluntly, amplified Thorin's inner desires and paranoia. While the trigger was the dragon's treasure, its root was in his own heart. Just then, a deafening dragon roar erupted from the treasury, reverberating throughout the lonely mountain. Everyone present instantly changed expression, their gazes turning in the direction of the treasury. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.